Lost is a subpar healer who only knows how to use one basic heal spell, and because of this, he gets kicked out of his party and is called an ignorant loser by the people around him. One day in the guild, a girl asks Lost to form a party with him, and this is so surprising that everyone in the guild goes from minding their own business to a state of utter disbelief. Even Lost can't understand why she would want to form a party with him. But the girl points out that he is holding a party recruitment sign, so he is clearly looking for party members. The girl's name is Narcina, and she introduces herself as a martial artist in need of a party member, but before she can get Lost to agree to team up with her, the guild receptionist runs up and interrupts her. The receptionist's name is Amherst, and she takes Narcina by the shoulders just to tell her how much of a bum Lost is. Lost is a healer, but he is only capable of using the basic heal spell despite having been an adventurer since he was a child. He can't use area heal or any high healing magic. So everyone has branded him as an incompetent fool. However, despite all this, until recently, there was a party called Blade of Lightning that took him in as a member, but Lost sucked at his job so much that he eventually got kicked out. And because he is seen as a failure, no one wants to team up with him anymore. Amherst encourages Narcina to ignore Lost because he's so ignorant that she won't be able to make any profit, but Narcina actually has a lot of money on hand, so she isn't worried about profits right now. To prove it, Narcina pulls out her bag full of money to show Amherst, and she has clearly never been to Detroit because she would have gotten mugged almost instantly. Amherst warns Narcina that the adventurers here aren't exactly law-abiding citizens, so she should be careful about flashing so much cash like that. Narcina thanks Amherst for the advice and says she will keep it in mind, but from the way she responded, it doesn't look like Narcina really understood what Amherst was talking about. Amherst assumes Narcina must be a new adventurer, so she offers to help set her up with some newbie-friendly adventurers so she can make it through the day without getting robbed, but of course, she'll be charging a small fee for her services. Narcina appreciates the offer, but she already decided a long time ago that Lost was the only person she would form a party with, so she's going to stick with him. Amherst still doesn't think it's a good idea, but since Narcina is so insistent, she begins the paperwork for their party formation. Narcina asks what the paper is for, so Amherst explains that they need to fill out the registration form to officially be recognized as a guild. Lost fills out his portion of the paperwork, and once he's done, he asks Narcina to write her name on it. Narcina was busy staring at Lost, so she was caught off guard when he asked her to write her name. But she still does it, and after Lost pays Amherst her commission fee, his and Narcina's party has officially been formed. They leave the guild together, and Lost begins talking to Narcina about the Mardat Labyrinth, since that's where they are headed. Apparently, no one has actually finished exploring the end of the Mardat Labyrinth, so there's no information on what kind of monster the Labyrinth Master is or how deep the labyrinth goes. Naturally, adventurers began to take up the challenge and explore the labyrinth in hopes of receiving large rewards, and the resulting influx of people led to the formation and growth of Mardat, the largest labyrinth city in the world. Narcina is happy to learn all about the labyrinth, but she asks if it is really alright for them to be heading into it so soon. Before they left the guild, Amherst was adamant that Lost shouldn't take her into the labyrinth because Narcina is still a newbie, and Lost definitely remembers her advice, but he's choosing to ignore it. Due to the amount of magical energy that leaks out from the labyrinth, monsters are able to spawn in different locations around the city. These locations are classified as the mountains, the forest, the wetlands, and the plains, but among them all, the plains are by far the safest since only weak monsters spawn there. Normally, a beginner adventurer would start by practicing in the plains so they can get a feel for combat, but it's such a large area that it's pretty difficult to find monsters to fight there. In contrast, monsters appear by the dozens in the labyrinth, and as long as you don't go too deep, you won't run into any particularly strong monsters, so Lost figures it will be a lot quicker for Narcina to gain experience there. Narcina agrees with Lost, so they both continue to the labyrinth entrance, but before they go in, Narcina is eager to contribute to the party, so she says she will lead the way since combatants are supposed to be the vanguard. Lost doesn't usually stand back when he goes into the labyrinth, but since Narcina is so happy about being the vanguard, he decides to just let her have her fun. Although, as they walk through the dungeon halls, he starts having his doubts because he doesn't know if Narcina is actually capable of fighting or not. Okay, never mind, Narcina knows how to box, and she's putting in work against a group of goblins she ran into. She defeats them all with relative ease, and Lost is really impressed with the amount of skill she possesses. The defeated goblins soon turn to dust, and in their place, a magic stone is left, so Lost picks it up and explains to Narcina that adventurers give these stones to the guild and receive money in exchange. Narcina asks what the guild uses the stones for, so Lost tells her that the stones have magical energy stored in them, so they can be used in all manners of tools and equipment. That much should be common knowledge to her as an adventurer, but Narcina was never much of a learner. They've got 5 stones in total, and although goblin magic stones aren't worth much, they will still be able to get enough money from these to cover lodging for the night. They could call it a day and head back to town, or they could go a little deeper into the labyrinth to get some more money. And Marcena is happy fun, so she says she wants to keep going. They head deeper into the labyrinth, but at a certain point, Las grabs Marcena and pulls her back because there's danger ahead. At first, she's confused because she didn't notice anything off, but Las grabs a rock and places it on the tile in front of her, and it activates a pit trap which would have totally killed her if Las hadn't intervened. Marcena is amazed and asks Las how he spotted the trap, so Las explains that the trap tile was a different shade of gray from the others, so he figured something must be wrong. Marcena is glad Las was able to notice it, but trap identification is meant to be the job of a thief, so how come Las is so good at it when he's a healer? Las just tells her that he has been an adventurer for a long time, so he has picked up a bunch of skills over the years. They continue to move forward, but soon enough they come across an orc roaming the halls, and Las is surprised by this since orcs are mid-level monsters, so they aren't meant to appear so high up in the labyrinth. Marcena asks if they should turn and run away. Las doesn't think that will be necessary because his and Marcena's combined strength should be enough to take it down, but he isn't going to force her to do anything she doesn't want to. Marcena says she is fine with it since Las believes they can win, so they get in position and Marcena charges at it, but when she lands her first kick, it feels more like she's kicking a rock than a monster. The orc raises its club and tries to strike her down, but Marcena is able to block it with her hands, although she gets backed into a corner because of it and has nowhere to run as the orc prepares for another attack. However, moments before she is struck down, Las steps in front of her and defeats the orc with a single stab of his sword. He asks Marcena if she's alright, and she's both amazed and grateful that he was able to save her, but she also wonders how he just did that when he's meant to be a healer. Las says he just happened to pick up a few combat skills over his years of being an adventurer, but that aside, they still need to collect magic stone, so they go to retrieve it, and it's a lot bigger than the ones they got from the goblins. It also has more magic in it, so they will get a lot more money if they sell it. With that said, Las asks her if she wants to call it a day and head back to the guild since they've earned enough money, and she has demonstrated her skills, but Marcena says she wants to keep going a little longer, so Las ends up agreeing. By the end of their labyrinth exploration, they've gathered a lot of magic stones and returned to the guild to exchange them with Amherst. Amherst is surprised that they managed to get this many gems in only half a day, but then she notices the orc gem and begins scolding Las for taking Marcena into the labyrinth when she specifically told him not to. It was really reckless of him to take her to the mid-level floors where she is just a beginner, but Las says he didn't actually take Marcena to the deep floors. They were on the beginner level the entire time, and he only intended for them to fight goblins. But there was an orc roaming on the upper floors for some reason. Marcena confirms that Las is telling the truth, so Amherst believes him, and his story isn't too far-fetched anyway, since there have been a lot of similar reports of high-level monsters showing up in beginner areas. Amherst isn't sure what's going on, but she knows it must mean something bad is going on down in the labyrinth. Although she doesn't get paid enough here to really care. Anyway, she asks if Las is here to sell all these gems, and Las says he is, so Amherst excitedly begins gathering the payment for him. Marcena notices that Amherst is a little too happy to be buying magic gems, so Las explains that as guild staff, when Amherst buys magic gems from the adventurers she manages, she gets a fat commission on the sale. Once the money is ready, Las is shocked to see just how much there actually is, but Amherst reminds him that half of that belongs to Marcena. Las is aware that he only gets half, but even half is 10 times more than what he usually got paid when he was part of Lightning Blade, and that's when he realizes that he was scammed by Lightning Blade. Amherst kind of finds the whole thing funny, but Marcena reminds her that it's the guild's job to arbitrate when there are pay disputes, so Amherst says she will help Las get his money back if he wants her to. He thinks about it for a second, but he eventually decides not to bother getting his money back since he has already formed a new party and he wants nothing to do with Lightning Blade anymore. After Las leaves, the guild branch manager comes out, and while Amherst is busy counting her money, Handsome goes up to her and asks if Las was just here, and if so, he hopes she didn't refer him to any parties. Amherst says she obviously didn't refer that idiot to any parties, but there was one girl who specifically wanted to form a party with him, so there was nothing she could do about it. At the same time, Las and Marcena arrive at an inn, and Las is welcomed by the innkeeper's daughter. She asks if Marcena is the girl who recently joined his party, and Las confirms it, but he wonders how she knew about it already. The girl tells him that the news has been getting around since no one ever expected him to be able to form a party, but that aside, she asks if he is her to have something to eat. Lost would love some food, but first, he says he wants to reserve a room, so he goes to talk to the little girl's mother. Mary would be happy to get them a room, so she asks if they will be sleeping together or in separate rooms. Narcena blushes a little at the thought, but Lost tells Mary that they will be staying in separate rooms, although Narcena actually kind of liked the idea of sharing a bed with Lost. A little while later, Lost and Narcena go to bed, and once Narcena is alone in her room, she begins thinking about the first time she met Lost several years earlier. He had just saved her from an accident and was healing her wound with his basic heal spell, so she was really grateful that he took the time to heal her. So she decided right then and there that she would become an adventurer when she grew up and support Lost in any way she could. Since that day, Narcena began training relentlessly, and as soon as she heard that Lost had been banished from his party, she rushed over to the capital so she could be the first to team up with him. However, she is just now realizing that Lost probably didn't recognize her at all. Although it's hard to blame him since she did grow a lot taller than she was back then, she was wearing different clothes and her hair color even changed to blue. And even though she came here to help him, it turns out that Lost is so talented that he doesn't actually need her protection, but regardless of whether he recognizes her or not, Narcena intends to continue to support him no matter what. Still, she can't help but wonder why people in this city call him an idiot, even though he is so strong. Back when Lost was still a part of Lightning Blade, the party was up against a Hydra and one party member has already been injured by it, so it was Lost's job to heal her, while the party leader held off the monster. Unfortunately, while Lost was able to heal the physical injury, the woman was also poisoned, so she asked if Lost could deal with the poison as well. Lost apologizes and tells her he can't actually get rid of the poison, so the woman gets pissed, because that means she has to recover by herself. The leader asks her to stop complaining and get back into the fight already because he can't keep the Hydra busy forever, but with the poison still in her system, the woman is in no condition to fight. The leader asks Lost to get her back in shape, but Lost says he can't do it and that they should have brought an antidote potion with them. The leader argues that he didn't buy one because antidotes are expensive, and that's supposed to be Lost's job as a healer. Since Lost and Siberia aren't going to get much help for now, the leader turns to the mage and asks her to do something to help him because he can't handle the Hydra by himself. So Armia tries using a fling spell, but it does absolutely nothing against the Hydra, so she gets scared and drops her staff. Margulis has given up on his party's incompetence, so he turns around and orders everyone to retreat immediately. Since Margulis gave up, Armia breaks down and runs away as well, followed by Lost and Siberia, who still can't walk, so Lost is helping her. However, as they are leaving, the Hydra keeps a close eye on Lost for some reason. Once they got back to the guild, Margulis took great joy in telling Lost that he was being kicked out of the Lightning Blade party, and he justifies his decision by saying it's Lost's fault that they couldn't defeat the Hydra, although Lost doesn't think he's the only one to blame since both Margulis and Siberia were so excited to battle the Hydra that they stayed up all night and went into the fight sleep deprived. The two of them refuse to accept any accountability for the failure, so they both look to Armia and tell her to decide who is at fault. Armia doesn't want to put the blame solely on Lost, but she also performed terribly during that battle, so she doesn't want Margulis targeting her instead for being useless, and thus she decides to throw Lost under the bus. Lost soon wakes up from his dream, and he realizes that he must still be bothered by what happened to him that day. Back before Lost joined Lightning Blade, he was already known as an idiot healer by everyone in town, although he still dreamed of becoming a first-rate adventurer. So when a party reached out to him with a position, Lost was overjoyed and jumped at the opportunity. However, once they were in a labyrinth, Lost soon found out that they hadn't hired him because they wanted a healer. They hired him because they wanted a human sacrifice to distract the monsters. Lost was tossed out and forced to run for his life while his so-called party members at the time tried to walk past him without a care in the world, but all of a sudden, the monsters turned their attention away from Lost and began attacking the other party members instead, leading to a total massacre. In the end, Lost was the only one who managed to survive, and while he knows it is normal for a weak commoner like him to be treated this way, he still wished that someone would acknowledge him as a real adventurer. Just then, as he was walking home, he came across a carriage that had been attacked by some goblins, and normally he wouldn't care enough to put himself in danger by helping, but he saw how scared the little girl looked, so he threw caution to the wind and ran down to defend her even though he was just a useless healer. He did his best to fight off the goblins, but he still sucked at combat back then, so in a matter of minutes, Bro got knocked out by a club to the back of the head. Lost fully expected to die that day, but he eventually wakes up and finds the little girl standing over him. He wonders how he could possibly still be alive, but then he looks over and notices that the Knight's Order had shown up and defeated all the goblins. He went through all the effort of trying to act heroic, but in the end, it looks like he is still an absolute idiot no matter what he does. However, despite the fact that he didn't do much, the girl still thanks him because his actions bought enough time for the knight's order to make it here, and she thought it was really cool the way he jumped in to save her. Lost notices a scratch on the girl's arm, so he raises his hand to heal her injury, and she is thankful for it. But Lost doesn't think he deserves any praise because low heal is the only thing he can actually do. The girl looks confused, so Lost tells her all about his weakness and how he was just tricked into going into the labyrinth just so he could be used as bait. And she feels sorry that he had to go through such a thing, so she stands up and declares that she will become an adventurer in the future and form a party with him so she can protect Lost. Soon enough, the girl left with a knight's order, and by now, Lost had pieced together that she was the daughter of a noble family, so he never believed she would actually become an adventurer or that he would ever meet her again. But nevertheless, her words gave him courage, so he decided to continue doing his best to become a proper adventurer. He went on a journey and soon found himself a mentor, so under their instruction, he began his training arc and worked tirelessly for countless hours to improve himself. And while as a healer he could still only use basic heal, he developed many other useful adventurer skills, so he was confident that he would no longer be a burden to anyone. And upon returning to pursue his adventurer dream, the first party he joined was Lightning Blade, but we all know how that turned out, don't we? Still, Lost is grateful to that girl, because if she hadn't said those kind words to him that day, probably would have quit being an adventurer once and for all that day. But it's not like he will ever get the chance to meet her again. And there's no way she would have actually become an adventurer like she said she would. Just then, Narcena knocks on his door, so Lost goes to answer it and she tells him she was thinking about going down to get some breakfast, so she wanted him to come with her, and he happily agrees. After breakfast, they head down into the labyrinth again, and this time they are going for some of the lower floors. As they enter, Narcena spots an inscription in the ground and it looks like it's a teleportation circle, although she has never seen one in person before. Lost explains that you don't find teleportation circles in every labyrinth, and this one was probably put here by magicians soon after the labyrinth was discovered, although he doesn't have much information about it. Narcena asks if they can use this to teleport to different locations, and that's technically correct, but there still needs to be a teleportation circle on the other side to exit from. That sounds really convenient, so Narcena wishes there was a teleportation circle installed in the city so they didn't have to walk all the way out here. But the knowledge used to create these circles was lost hundreds of years ago, so there's no way to make new ones. They both step onto the teleportation circle, and after a bright flash, they appear on one of the lower floors. Lost tells Narcena that this is one of the mid-level floors, so the monsters here are going to be a lot stronger than the goblins she fought yesterday, and he wants her to be extra careful. Lost and Narcena begin fighting their way through the floor, but Narcena goes off on her own and tries to punch a lich, but Lost warns her against it. Liches are monsters made up of pure spirit energy, so physical attacks won't work on it. Lost suggests they fall back since they don't have anything that can damage the lich, but Narcena says she actually has a trick up her sleeve that she may be able to work against it. Lost decides to trust her, so the two of them face off against the lich, and Lost goes out in front to act as bait. He then starts running away, and as the lich chases after him, he runs past Narcena, who is preparing herself to take the lich down. All people possess a form of spirit energy within them called prana, and as a martial artist, Narcena has training enough that she is able to control the prana within her body and use it as a weapon by covering her fists with it. This way, when she goes to attack the lich, she punches a hole straight through it, and it soon disintegrates like any other monster and drops its magic stone. Lost runs over to check on her, and she seems perfectly fine, aside from the wounds she got on her arm. Lost tells her to stay still for a second because he wants to try something, so he pulls out a magic item that enhances the effects of healing spells and uses it to heal Narcena's wounds. They head back to the guild together to show Amherst the stones, and she is shocked that they managed to defeat a lich, but she is also excited for the commission she will get from this sale. Lost and Narcena get a lot more money than they were expecting, so they are in a really good mood and start heading back to the inn, but along the way they run into a fight going on in the middle of the street. Things like this have been becoming more common over the years as more and more outlaws move into town to become adventurers, and they've been giving all the honest adventurers a bad name. It's a real mess, but there's nothing Lost or Narcena can do to change it, so Lost suggests that they should just enjoy their money and have a fancy dinner tonight. A little while later, Lost and Narcena are seated at their table and have been served one of Mary's best dishes to eat. While they eat, Narcena says she has a question she has been meaning to ask, so she points out to the giant stone pillar on the edge of town and asks what that thing is. At first, she thought it was a building, but it has no windows or doors, and it doesn't look like a monument either, so it's really confusing. Lost shares her confusion and explains that he doesn't know what it is either. He once got curious about it and asked one of the workers about it while it was still being constructed, but the workers didn't know what it was for or who was paying to have it built. Marcena can't believe something like that was possible, but apparently an agent just showed up one day with some money and blueprints, so no one ever met the funder. Still, as strange as it may seem, Lost just chalks it up to some billionaire doing random shit, and he's perfectly fine with that since the towers aren't actually hurting anyone. But he also wishes some of that money could have gone towards building a wall for the city since it doesn't have one. Marcena agrees that a wall for the city would be nice, but at the same time she doesn't think there's much to worry about since with the number of adventurers that live in this city, whether it is monsters or thieves that attack, she's sure they'll be able to fight off any threats. After dinner, they both head back to their room, but before Lost goes to bed for the night, Marcena calls him back. She clearly has something to say, but she can't bring herself to say it, so she just tells him good night and heads to bed. Inside her room, she jumps on her bed and is upset because she wanted to tell Lost that she wants to stay in the same room as him, but she couldn't come out and say it because it was too embarrassing. In the other room, Lost is lying in bed with his mind at ease now that he has such a great party member. He was able to continue adventuring thanks to that little girl's motivation, and while he doesn't know if he will ever get to meet her again, he has a lot to thank Marcena for. In other news, Margulis has just found a new member for the Lightning Blade party, and while he seems really excited to have Lyra join the team, Siberia doesn't seem to like her very much and Armia is too shy to make direct eye contact. Anyway, now that the team is complete again, Margulis is eager to head out and finally defeat that Hydra once and for all. The party heads back to the swamp to confront the Hydra, and luckily the Hydra hasn't grown its head back yet, so they won't have to do as much work. Margulis quickly comes up with a plan of attack and says he and Leela will attack from the front, Armia will provide magic support, and Siberia will sneak up from behind. He's just about ready to run out into the action, but Leela calls a timeout because there's no way she can be on the front line of an attack as a healer. Margulis is confused because Lost always fought on the front lines with them, and Leela can't believe they were forcing their former to fight out on the front lines, but Lost never seemed to mind. In fact, Siberian recalls that Lost sometimes got some really good hits in, and he was actually the one who cut one of the Hydra's heads off. Leela is in disbelief after hearing this, but Margulis doesn't expect her to do something like that. If she says she can't fight on the front lines, he is fine with that, but to make sure, he asks her if she is capable of casting the Detoxify spell to counter the Hydra's poison, and that's something she can actually do, so Margulis tells everyone to get into position to slay the Hydra today. Back in town, Lost and Marcena have just returned from their latest trip into the labyrinth, and Amherst is glad to see that they've brought more gems to sell to her. But she reminds Lost that he shouldn't push Marcena too far because she is still only a new adventurer, so Lost assures her that he is being very careful about the fights they get into. Amherst is glad to hear that they are being cautious, but there's still a limit to how much can be done with a party of two, so she suggests that Lost and Marcena should think about recruiting some new party members to make things easier for them. Lost agrees that more party members would make things easier, but ultimately, he decides that it isn't worth the hassle since he and Marcena are already making a lot of money as they are. Amherst admits that he's right since with the amount they've been making recently, they could probably rent a house instead of staying at an inn if they wanted to. Marcena had no idea it was possible to rent a house in the city, so Amherst explains that there's a limit to the amount of equipment and items that you can store at an inn, but that's not an issue when you have a private room, although it's quite expensive. But the real value shines when there's a male and female party, so the extra privacy allows for a lot of late-night activity. Marcena suddenly seems really interested in renting a private house for some reason, but seeing as Lost did not react, Amherst doubts late-night activity is a possibility in this case. Speaking of private houses, Lost recalls that Lightning Blade had a private house as well, although they forced him to sleep in the storage closet, so it wasn't very comfortable for him. Amherst laughs at how badly Lost was getting mistreated, but if it makes him feel better, she lets him know that he was actually pretty lucky to have been banished from Lightning Blade. Ever since he was kicked out, Margulis and the rest of Lightning Blade haven't been able to accomplish a single mission. Margulis can't understand why, but Leela can clearly tell that he is too dumb to realize he isn't strong enough to handle a Hydra head-on. Margulis hears her, so he's about to start yelling again, but Leela tells him to be quiet, otherwise she can't concentrate on helping Armia recover. Armia was badly injured and poisoned, so Leela really does need to concentrate, and while she is doing that, Siberia tells Margulis that as much as she hates to admit it, Lost may have been more valuable than they gave him credit for. Even though he sucked at healing, he was still able to get the job done in the end, and he also didn't notice that they were scamming him out of his money, so he was the perfect party member. Margulis is really wishing Lost hadn't quit, but Siberia reminds him that he was actually the one who kicked Lost out of the party, and he made a big show of it too. Margulis had totally forgotten all about that, but if he was the one who kicked Lost out, then he thinks it should be easy to get him back. All they have to do is ask, and he is sure Lost will rejoin the party immediately because, after all, they are the famous Blades of Lightning. So no one would turn down an invitation to join the party, although Siberia is starting to question if she even wants to stay in the party at this point. By the next morning, Leela is finally done healing Armia, so she wakes up and thanks her for the healing, but Leela is just happy she could help. She asks if Armia feels well enough to eat, and since she does, Leela heads downstairs to get some food for her. But when heads downstairs to ask where the food is stored, she realizes Siberia and Margulis are gone, and she has no idea where they went. Margulis and Siberia are currently at the guild, and Margulis loudly proclaims that he is willing to graciously allow Lost to return to his party. Once again, everyone stops what they are doing and stares in disbelief, and Lost is most shocked of all. So he asks Margulis to repeat himself because there's no way he could have actually said something so dumb. Margulis repeats himself, and Lost's ears weren't deceiving him, but he still doesn't know how to respond or such a ridiculous request. At the same time, Narcina and Amherst see what's going on, and Amherst explains the blonde guy is the leader of the party that kicked Lost out, and now he's trying to get him to come back by acting condescending. Lost obviously isn't amused with Margulis' speech, but before he can say anything, Margulis assumes he might be upset about the fact that they scammed him out of his pay while he was in their party, so Margulis apologizes and acts like it was an honest accident. He promises that Lost will get a fair share this time around, plus they could really use his help since the new healer Margulis hired isn't very useful in combat. Siberia thinks there's no way Lost will actually agree to Margulis' request, but to her shock, Lost actually thanks Margulis for the offer. Narcina refuses to let Lost be stolen from her, so she runs out in front of him and starts yelling at Margulis, saying Lost will never join his party again. Lost touches her shoulder and tells Narcina that she doesn't need to worry about him leaving, after which he turns to Margulis and tells him that he was only saying thanks to be polite, but he has no interest in ever joining his party again. Margulis can't believe he got turned down, so he starts getting desperate and accuses Narcina of trying to use Lost because she realized he is actually really useful to have around. All Margulis' aggressive pointing is starting to get on Lost's nerves, so he grabs Margulis' hand and warns him that if he ever does anything to hurt Narcina, Lost will make sure his body will be mangled beyond recognition. Lost then turns to leave, and Narcina pauses for a second to rub it in Margulis' face one last time. After they've left, Margulis doesn't know what to do, but he still wants to defeat the Hydra, so he yells at Amherst to recommend him a new adventurer for his party, preferably one who can handle fighting on the front lines alongside him, and Amherst really doesn't want to have to deal with him, but it looks like she won't have to because an adventurer walks out from the crowd, and this dude looks like he completed all the side quests before coming here. The mysterious man offers to join his party and asks if Margulis is satisfied with his level of strength. Margulis checks the guy out, and he definitely looks strong, but to make sure, he is going to have to test his sword skills. He draws his sword and charges at the man, but with a simple swing of his sword, the man instantly disarms Margulis and makes him look stupid in front of the entire guild. After recovering from the embarrassment, Margulis says he will accept the man into his party. However, Siberia doesn't think it's a good idea to trust a man who wears a mask all the time, but Margulis says they have no choice because if they don't defeat that Hydra, Lightning Blade's reputation as a strong party will sink like a rock. So he walks up to the guy and asks for his name, so the guy tells him his name is Shig. Back at Lost's and Narcina's inn, Narcina is checking herself in the mirror when she hears someone knocking on Lost's door, so she goes out to check who it is and finds Sheila at Lost's door. For some reason, her first thought is that Sheila is trying to make a move on Lost, but after thinking about it for a bit, she realizes that couldn't be possible. Once Lost finally opens the door, Sheila informs him that he has guests waiting for him downstairs, which is surprising, but Lost decides to go meet with them to see what this is about. Once he gets downstairs, Lost and Narcina meet with Armia and Leela, and while Armia feels bad for coming at him with such a brazen request, she asks Lost if he could come and help them just this once. Margulis still intends to go after that Hydra, and even hired a new warrior to help with the mission, but Leela doesn't think it's going to be enough to win. For one thing, Margulis is still too stubborn to buy an antidote potion because it costs money, and he's never going to realize how reckless he is being until someone ends up dying because of him. Armia knows it's too late to apologize now, but she acknowledges how strong Lost is, because if he hadn't cut off the Hydra's head last time they fought it, the entire party would have been wiped out. Lost still doesn't think he did all that much, but Leela points out that the party struggled to survive against a Hydra that had lost 2 heads already, so they would have been dead meat if it was in perfect condition. Lost asks what exactly Armia is asking him to do, so Armia stands up and says she wants Lost to fight with them, because she is sure they can defeat the Hydra if he is there as well. She is basically asking him to rejoin Lightning Blade, but Lost already had this conversation with Margulis earlier today, and his answer remains the same. Marcina wonders why Armia seems so determined to help Margulis out, since this whole ordeal must be horrible for her to deal with. And yes, Armia believes Margulis has a lot of flaws, and I mean a lot, but even so, he's still her party member. Marcina becomes angry after hearing this because Lost was her party member as well, but she did absolutely nothing to support him when he was being mistreated. Armia begins crying and apologizes for what she did to Lost, but at the time she was scared that if she didn't go along with what Margulis said, she would be kicked out of the party as well. She is a new adventurer, so she doesn't know any other parties to go to, but she now realizes that what she did was wrong and that Margulis is wrong for the way he treated Lost. But even though she doesn't agree with Margulis' way of doing things, she still doesn't want him to get himself killed in an unwinnable battle. Leela tells Lost that Armia is serious about her apology and she has been agonizing over it for a long time. Leela tells Lost that Armia is serious about her apology and she has been agonizing over it for a long time. So while she understands Lost can decline the request, she asks that he at least consider accepting Armia's apology. Lost gets up and tells Armia that he holds no grudge against her, so he will accept her apology, but he still has no intention of returning to Lightning Blade. Armia is disappointed, but she accepts his answer and says she won't bother him about it anymore. Just then, Mary comes over and she has brought a whole feast to cheer Armia up since she looks like she hasn't been eating well. While Armia is eating, Lost talks with Leela and asks if there is any way for her to take Armia and leave Margulis' party, but if she could have done that, she wouldn't have come here in the first place. Lost knows how Margulis treats people, so he suggests that Leela should leave his party anyway, but Leela refuses to do that since she would be leaving Armia to fend for herself under the leadership of that idiot. The next day, Margulis finally introduces Leela to Shig since they will be fighting the Hydra again today, but she seems to recognize him from somewhere, so she wants to have a word with him. She asks what he's doing here and why he is disguising himself, but Shig is still trying to pretend that he has never met Leela before, so he tries walking away, but as he does so, she notices the sword on his back which used to belong to a person named Ronaldo, so she accuses him of stealing it, but Shig denies it and says it was handed down to him as a gift, so he is no thief. He may have cleared his name of theft, but the fact that he admitted knowing Ronaldo lets Lyra know that he is indeed the same Shig she knew. However, she decides to keep his secret identity hidden since it seems important to him. Later on in the day, Lost and Arsena are heading into the labyrinth as they usually do, but he can't help but worry about Armia and the rest of Lightning Blade because he has no idea if they are truly ready for the battle or not. Down in the labyrinth, Lost is letting Arsena take on some of the mid-level monsters by herself, and she has been doing great so far, but all the moving around made her really hungry, so Lost suggests they should take a break and have lunch. Arsena is glad to hear that, so she brings out the food she packed, but all this seems a little too extravagant for just lunch. Arsena explains that Armia didn't eat much of the food Mary made for her yesterday, so this morning before they left, Mary gave the leftovers to Arsena and told her to eat it for lunch so it wouldn't go to waste. While they eat, Lost gives Arsena some lore about the Hydra and tells her that its body is covered in tough muscles that make it difficult to pierce. It's also venomous and has got scales that deflect physical and magical attacks. That sounds really tough to fight, so Arsena wonders if Armia is going to be alright in a fight against a monster like that, but Lost says there's no need to worry. An antidote for the Hydra's venom was developed and is being sold in Marmot, so poisoning won't be a concern, but Arsena reminds him that Margulis still refused to buy it. Lost kind of forgot about that, and Lightning Blade is kind of screwed if they get poisoned, so they'll just have to rely on Lyra's detoxification spell instead. He can see that Arsena is getting worried about Armia and Lightning Blade, so he assures her that the party can handle themselves just fine without him. Margulis may be an idiot, but he is still a decent swordsman when he actually puts effort into preparing. And Siberia is quick on her feet, so she should be able to avoid most of the Hydra's attacks. In any case, it has nothing to do with Lost, and this is something Lightning Blade has to handle on its own, and they'll probably be fine. Lost gets up and says they should keep going, but Arsena tells him she's getting sick of exploring the same labyrinth over and over, so she wants to try something new, and it just so happens that there's a swamp nearby. so she wants to go there for no particular reason. And definitely not because she's worried about Armia. Meanwhile, in the swamp, Lightning Blade is battling the Hydra, and with his exceptional skills, C is able to severely wound the Hydra, and he could have taken it down just now, but he chose to hold back and returns to the ground. Margulis asks C why he didn't finish the Hydra off, and C has his reasons, but to convince Margulis, he tells him it would be much cooler if the party leader was the one who slayed the Hydra, and Margulis agrees, so he charges forward to attack it again. Lara wishes Margulis wouldn't rush into things from the front all the time, but Siberia says that's just how he is. Lyra is done healing her, so Siberia is able to return to battle as well, and from what Lyra can tell, Seed is the strongest person in the party, but it doesn't look like he has any intention of joining the fight again, so it's up to the others to finish off the Hydra. Still, his previous attacks left the Hydra weakened and slow, so as long as Siberia can successfully distract the Hydra long enough, Margulis' frontal assault strategy will actually work. Armia is also keeping the Hydra busy with her magic, so if things keep going like this, then the team will eventually win. But just when things were going their way, the Hydra launched a rock and knocked Armia to the ground. It then menacingly looms over her body, and Armia is so scared that the fear literally starts seeping out of her body. Monsters feed on the fear of humans, and normally you shouldn't be able to see fear like this, but it is visible because of an abnormally high amount of mana in the area. Mana concentrations of this level should only be possible in the labyrinth, but the Hydra is taking full advantage of it and begins to evolve. This is truly a frightening sight, and none of the others are capable of handling this on their own, so Seed decides to step in. He asks Lyra to take care of Armia and tells Margulis that he has to retreat immediately, but Margulis refuses to back down since they've already done a lot of damage to the Hydra, so it shouldn't be that hard to finish it off before it transforms. He leaps up into the air and attempts to slash the Hydra's head off, but once his sword connects with the monster's head, it shatters and Margulis is left completely defenseless as the Hydra prepares to counterattack. However, before the Hydra could land a fatal blow, Lofts shows up and deflects its attack along with Narcina. The Hydra backs off momentarily and Seed thanks Lofts for his help, but he says we'll handle the things from here, so he wants Lofts to go check on Armia since she's hurt. Lyra has already begun healing Armia, but the damage she sustained is severe and wizards are resistant to magic, so Lyra's healing magic isn't very effective. Lost offers to do the healing instead, so Lyra lets him, but she doesn't see what good it would do since basic healing magic is still going to be ineffective in this case. However, to her surprise, Lost starts spam casting heal until Armia begins to recover. This is the most absurd thing she has seen all day, but Margulis and Siberia don't think there's anything strange about it since this is how Lost always use healing magic, so they thought it was common practice. Lyra explains that not only is it extremely difficult to overlay heal spells like that, but she has never heard of improving the efficiency of a heal spell before. Thanks to Lost, Armia soon wakes up and she is really glad to see Lost, so she thanks him for coming to help, but she soon passes out again. Lost has dealt with most of her injuries, so she just needs to sleep for a while to recover her strength. But just when Lost thought his job was done, the Hydra screeches a battle cry which loosely translates to, "Lost, come at me bro, I want a rematch." Steam was going to kill it himself, but since it seems to be holding a grudge against Lost, he asks Lost if he wants to do it instead. Lost agrees to fight the Hydra, and since Lost is going, Narcina says she'll fight as well. Nothing Lost says will get her to change her mind, so he lets her fight by his side, but only under the condition that she must retreat instantly if she feels like she is in danger. Since it has been settled that Lost and Narcina will be fighting the Hydra, Seed tells the others not to get involved in the battle for their own safety. Narcina throws the first punch to disorient the Hydra, and Lost follows it up by slashing at one of the Hydra's heads. Seed also decides to join in, so he charges at the Hydra and uses his sword to slash off one of its heads. Margulis is amazed by this since Seed is a lot stronger than he had initially thought, but even if Seed is strong, he wonders how Seed's sword remained intact when his own shattered upon contact with the Hydra. Lyra tells him that Seed is using a special magic sword, which is far more powerful than any regular weapon, but magic swords are extremely rare, so Margulis wonders who Sieg is and how he acquired such a sword. The fight goes on, and Narcina attempts to land another punch on the dragon's sternum, but in the process she loses her footing, so the Hydra is able to take advantage and knocks her out cold. Now it could just kill her, but instead it stares straight at Lofts and communicates that it is sick of getting jumped, so it wants a fair 1 versus 1, otherwise it's going to end Narcina right now. Siberia can't believe the Hydra is smart enough to not only communicate off vibes alone, but to also know how to take a hostage. Lost has no other choice if he wants to ensure Narcina's safety, so he asks Sieg and Lyra not to interfere from now on. Lost then attacks the Hydra by himself, but before long, he gets knocked down by the Hydra as well. That was pretty anticlimactic since C was expecting Lost to be more impressive, but if this is truly all Lost has to offer, he is prepared to take down the Hydra instead. However, as Lost is about to lose consciousness, he reaches out to Narcena in an attempt to protect her, and all of a sudden, energy begins flowing out of his body and he stands back up to face the Hydra. Something is clearly different about Lost, but before the Hydra can react, Lost dashes forward and slashes off all the Hydra's heads in one fluid motion. Once the Hydra has been defeated, Lost loses consciousness again, and by the time he wakes up, Narcena is standing over him asking if he's alright. He says he's fine, but he's more concerned about Narcena's health since she took a direct hit from the Hydra. Narcena says she's perfectly fine, but only because Lara brought an antidote potion for emergencies, and that thing was expensive, so Lara says she will charge him for it later. That aside, she asks Lost what happened to him earlier, but Lost has no idea what she's talking about. Just then, Margulis interrupts and starts complimenting Lost on his strength and tries to convince him to rejoin his party. Lost cuts him off and says he's never going to rejoin Margulis' party, but Margulis keeps talking anyway. He says a lot of valuable magic stones were dropped from the Hydra and he is willing to split 3 ways with Lost if he joins them, but Lost finds it odd that Margulis only intends to split the reward 3 ways, so he asks what he means by that. Margulis says he's only going to split it for himself, Siberia, and Lost, so the other get nothing. Lara and C are new to the party, so he couldn't care less about them, and Armia gets scared and hurt so often that he thinks she is useless now and wants nothing to do with her. He and Siberia even consider selling her off as a slave just to get rid of her, and at this point, Lost has had enough, but before he can do anything, Narcena beats him to the punch and knocks Margulis to the ground. Margulis begins bitching and yells that it's against the guild's rules for adventurers to attack each other, so he's going to report Narcena to the guild and have her expelled from the guild. He asks if everyone saw what Narcena did, but strangely, everyone got hit with a sudden wave of blindness when Narcena hit Margulis. But what they did see was the fact that Margulis and Siberia were talking about selling Armia off as a slave, and there are laws against that here. So they are both guilty of attempted human trafficking. Steed couldn't possibly overlook such a heinous crime, so with his authority he says he is placing them under arrest. Back at the guild, we find out that Steed is a direct adventurer of the royal family, and he had received reports that the security in this town was deteriorating due to the adventurers here. So he was sent out to investigate it, and as soon as he arrived, he met Margulis and Siberia. Lara asks him what will happen to those two, and according to the rules, not only are they automatically expelled from the guild, they will be charged with human trafficking, which could lead to a lifetime of prison with forced labor in the best case for them. Margulis and Siberia start freaking out and begin pleading with Sieve to spare them because they can't afford to spend the rest of their lives in prison. They sound so pathetic that Lost starts to pity them, so he asks Sieg if he can talk to him outside for a second. Stieg agrees and asks what Lost wants to talk about, so Lost explains that those two may not be the most upstanding people, but just like him, they once had dreams of living as adventurers. However, at some point, their dream changed to become top adventurers, and that led them to become obsessed with fame and fortune. Lost's point is that Margulis and Siberia weren't always like this, so while most people would have given up on them by now, Lost still wants to give them another chance to live as good adventurers, so he asks Sieg to let them off with a warning this time. Sieg doesn't understand how Lost can be so forgiving, but since it's what he wants, he releases Margulis and Siberia. But he warns them that if he ever so much as hears a rumor about them causing trouble, they will never see the light of day again. Margulis and Siberia take the hint and immediately start running to get as far away from sea as possible, but once they are gone, Amherst asks if it is really okay to let those two off the hook so easily. Seed tells her that even if they expelled those two, it wouldn't make them better people, so he will be monitoring them to see if this has scared them straight or not. At the same time, Narcena apologizes to Lost because it was her that forced him to get involved and help Margulis, but Lost tells her it's alright. He may never be able to get over how Margulis and Siberia treated him back when he was a part of their party, but he feels a lot better now those two have left town, so he won't have to worry about them anymore. Later that day, Seed meets with Lyra in private to explain the real reason he came to this city. He was tasked with monitoring Marmot because there have been an unusually high number of monster evolutions taking place here, and there's definitely some foul play at work, so he needs to get to the bottom of it. And to do that, he's going to need Lyra's help, so he wants to form a party with her like before. Lyra isn't opposed to the idea, but she says she will only agree to it if Sieg allows Armia to join as well, since Armia needs somewhere to go. Sieg says he's fine with it, and in fact, it works out great for him since more party members means he can expand his surveillance. And there's a particular adventure that he has become interested in. The next day, Seed and the others meet up with Lost and Arsena for breakfast, and they tell them about their decision to form a party together. Arsena is surprised to hear this, but their party composition is pretty balanced, since they have a warrior, a healer, and a mage. Arsena asks Armia if she's alright with this arrangement, and Armia is more than satisfied because she would have had nowhere to go if C and Lyra hadn't taken her in, so she feels deeply indebted to them for it. After breakfast, Arsena asks Lost what he wants to do today, and surprisingly, Lost says the first thing he wants to do is head to the guild. Normally, they wouldn't head there so early in the day, but with all the commotion yesterday, he forgot to exchange the Hydra Magic gem for money, so he wants to get that done now. But the gem isn't the only reason he wants to go. He has been thinking about taking on a quest from the guild, since it's a way they can make money aside from selling magic gems. Arsena knows quests involve accepting jobs to do things like defeat monsters, find special items, or act as bodyguards for a group, and in exchange for the service, the guild will pay them money. But she has never considered taking a quest herself before. However, Lost tells her that if she wants to continue doing well as an adventurer, then she is going to have to gain some experience with completing quests alongside fighting monsters. Arsena is touched that Lost is thinking about her so much, but when Lost notices that she has gone quiet, he asks her if something is wrong and his face is a little too close to hers, so she is all embarrassed and tries to change the subject. A little while later, they finally arrive at the guild, but it seems like all eyes are on them for some reason. Arsena wonders why the atmosphere here seems so hostile, but then Lost overhears some of the adventurers gossiping about how he single-handedly slayed the Hydra, and he now understands what's going on. He pulls Arsena aside to warn her that they are going to need to be careful from now on, since the others in the guild have learned about their fight with the Hydra, and there may be some people here who will try to steal a Hydra magic stone from them since it's really valuable. Just then, Lost and Arsena are approached from behind by a group of adventurers, and Lost recognizes the leader as Marnell. Marnell says he wants to have a little chat with Lost, but Lost is hesitant to agree since it looks like Marnell is trying to jump him. Marnell realizes there has been a misunderstanding here, so he tells his guys they are making Lost nervous, so they should go wait outside for a minute. Marnell apologizes for coming to him with such a large group, but when his guys heard that Lost the Ignoramus defeated a Hydra single-handedly, they all got curious and wanted to ask him about it. But before any of that, Marnell wants to sincerely apologize to Lost for not helping him out when he needed it. Everyone in the guild knew that Margulis was mistreating Lost, yet none of them did anything to fix the situation. They all just looked the other way and ignored Lost's issues because they didn't want to have to deal with Margulis, and worse yet, they all mocked him behind his back, so they were just as bad as Margulis. While Marnell may not have done anything to Lost directly, he knows the way he ignored Lost was terrible, so he hopes Lost can forgive him, but Arsena cuts him off and says his apology is not accepted. Lost had to endure years of torment and mockery from everyone in this guild, so if they want forgiveness, Arsena says they'd all have to get on their hands and knees and beg for 3 days straight. Lost pleads with Arsena not to take things too far, because if she actually forces him to do that, then everyone's going to think Lost is the bad guy here. Besides, even if he may have defeated the Hydra, Lost is still an inadequate healer who can only use one heal spell, so he doesn't think they were wrong when they called him an ignoramus. Lost clearly hasn't learned anything about self-respect, because he tells Marnell it's okay for people to keep calling him Lost the Ignoramus, and extends his hand for a handshake to show that he has no hard feelings about it. Marnell shakes Lost's hand and tells him that if he ever finds himself in trouble, then he and his party will do whatever they can to help. Now that that's over, Lost and Arsena finally take the Hydra gem to Amherst so she can appraise it, but Amherst is left in utter disbelief because this is the most unique magic stone she has seen in a long time. The Hydra's mutation caused a drastic change in the composition of the stone, so now she says it might be worth well over 10 times the original price. Monster mutations don't happen often, so any mutated stone would be worth a lot on its own. But this one is from a Hydra, so it's especially rare. The fact that the Hydra mutated in the wetlands is also a problem though, since monster mutations require an enormous amount of mana, and the wetlands normally don't have enough mana to facilitate it. It's possible for mana to accumulate outside the labyrinth, but it's unlikely for that to happen naturally, and there's also the fact that Lost and Arsena encountered a high-level orc on the upper floors of the labyrinth, so there's definitely something going on in there. Arsena asks why the guild hasn't done something about this, like send an expedition out to investigate the cause of these strange occurrences, and that's a good question, so as Handsome, the branch manager, happens to be walking by, Lost and Arsena decide to report the matter to him. In Handsome's office, Lost and Arsena give detailed accounts of the high-level monsters on low-level floors and the Hydra mutating outside the labyrinth, but Handsome doesn't seem to care. Lost tries to convince him that this is a serious issue since if they don't find out why monsters have been getting stronger lately, then other adventurers might end up getting hurt. But once again, Handsome says he doesn't have time to deal with such a trivial matter, and if adventurers end up dying because of something like this, then they were probably better off dead anyway. Lost sees that Handsome has no intention of investigating the events, but even if he's not going to do anything about it, Lost suggests that he should at least post a warning to let people know of the new dangers, but Handsome seems to have a personal grudge against Lost, so instead he warns Lost to either stop complaining or to get out of this town. They aren't getting anywhere with Handsome, so they leave his office and Narcina is really pissed at him for what he said. Lost tries to calm her down and says Handsome is probably too busy to deal with the issue, but that's not why Narcina is angry. She is angry because of the way Handsome treated Lost, because there was no reason for him to be so hostile, but Amherst tells her that that's just the way Handsome is. The master of this guild, Mist, is an old and reclusive person, so they almost never leave their office. That's why Handsome has been left in charge of running the guild, and though he may not be the best person, he gets the job done, so there aren't many complaints about him. The only problem is that he expects everyone to be perfect, so he would constantly berate people for even the slightest mistakes, and that really gets on her nerves. That aside, Lost says he has a favorite ask of Amherst since he was hoping to pick up a quest with Narcina. Amherst is more than happy to help, so she brings out a list of all the quests that are available at the moment and allows Lost to look through it. The quests all seem to be pretty mundane, especially this one about a guy looking for a fishing buddy in the labyrinth, so Narcina is really disappointed. Amherst understands that Narcina thinks it's a bit lame, but she would still be getting paid for it, so it's an official job and she shouldn't look down on it. While Lost is looking through the rest of the list, he notices a quest which involves defeating a monster, and Narcina seems to be a lot more excited about this one since it sounds like it will be action-packed. She says she's interested in taking this quest, but Amherst is a little hesitant to let her have it since it's not exactly a good fit for their party. The quest is to eliminate a phoenix that lives near one of the mid-floor teleportation circles, and if they manage to pull it off, it would earn them a lot of money, but a party consisting only of a healer and a martial artist won't stand a chance against that kind of monster. Lost agrees with Amherst on this since it would be practically impossible to defeat a flying phoenix when they don't have a long-ranged attacker. Amherst says she would only allow them to accept the quest if they had a warrior and a mage, as well as another healer who could use area heal to help everyone recover. Lost thinks about it for a second, and he just so happens to know a party with a warrior, a mage, and a healer that could help with this quest. A little while later, Lost meets with Sieg and the others to discuss the Phoenix subjugation mission, and both Lyra and Sieg seem to be on board with the mission, especially since it would make it easier for Sieg to keep an eye on Lost. Before they agree to anything though, Lyra asks Armia if she's willing to partake in the mission, and Armia says she doesn't mind, but she asks Lost if he's sure he wants her to be a part of the group after the way she treated him. Lost says he's not mad at her for what she did, and as long as she acknowledges that the way she acted was wrong, he feels like he can trust her to do better in the future. Now that they've agreed to work together, they need to begin preparing for the mission, so everyone heads to the market to start shopping for the gear they will need. After shopping for a while, Lost tells Narcina that he wants to stop by a medicine shop so he can get a few medicinal creams, because burn wounds heal a lot faster if you use medicine on them, in addition to healing magic. Narcina is amazed by how much Lost knows about being an adventurer, but because he's so knowledgeable, Narcina almost never gets a chance to make herself useful, and she's worried that Lost might not need her around anymore. While Narcina was in deep thought, someone sneaks up from behind and grabs her, so Narcina instinctively reacts and tries to punch her attacker, but the attacker seems far more skilled than Narcina anticipated as she effortlessly dodges the punch and jumps backwards. Once Narcina gets a good look at her, she realizes that she actually recognizes the attacker. The woman's name is Ralma, otherwise known as the Fire Goddess Adventurer, and she's pretty close with Narcina's father, so she was sent here to check on Narcina since she pretty much ran away from home to come here. She assumes the reason Narcina ran away from home is the man behind her, but now that she gets a good look at him, she recognizes Lost, and Lost seems to recognize her as well. They all head to a restaurant so they can talk, and Lost explains to Narcina that he was once Ralma's student, although it was just for a short time, and Ralma thinks of him as a terrible student. She points her fork at Lost and tells him that she wants to discuss something with Narcina that directly involves her family, so she wants him to leave the table, but Lost stands his ground and tells her he won't be leaving. He's in a party with Narcina, so her problems are his problems too, and he is concerned that Ralma might try to drag Narcina back home against her will if he's not here. Ralma finds it amusing that Lost thinks he could stop her if she wanted to take Narcina, but Lost is more than willing to try if Ralma pushes the issue. Ralma tries to scare Lost by conjuring up a small fireball and launching it at him, but Lost is unfazed and easily evades it, so Ralma agrees to let him stay since he seems a lot more capable than he was the last time she saw him. Before they start discussing anything though, Narcena wants to make it clear that she didn't actually run away from home. Sure, may have forgotten to tell her parents she was leaving, but she did leave a note saying she was leaving to go be with a man who is almost 10 years older than her. After hearing all that, both Lost and Ralma are shocked, and Lost is starting to understand why Narcena's parents would be so worried. Ralma assures them that Narcena's parents aren't against her becoming an adventurer, they just wanted Ralma to make sure that Narcena wasn't in any kind of danger here, and seeing as she is with Lost, Ralma is sure Narcena will be perfectly safe, so there's no reason for her to get involved any further. Ralma lets the two of them go on with their shopping, and she's glad she made sure Narcena is alright, but that wasn't the only reason she came to this town. Her main mission is to figure out what the guild master, Miss, is plotting, because there's definitely something sinister going on in this town. The next day, the group makes their way into the labyrinth with the teleportation circle, and Narcena is on guard the second they come out, but to her surprise, the Phoenix is nowhere to be seen. She thought they would have to fight it as soon as they got here, but Lost tells her the Phoenix wouldn't fit in here. Phoenixes aren't necessarily giant monsters, but the passageway is too small for any Phoenix to crawl through, so the group is going to head a little deeper into the labyrinth to find it. Monsters with wings don't like cramped spaces like these, but the group eventually comes across a wide open area which looks exactly like a Phoenix's preferred habitat. According to the info Lyra got about this place is apparently newly discovered, meaning there's a lot of unexplored paths and unclaimed treasure to be found, and both Narcena and Armia are excited to hear that, but there's one problem. The Phoenix is in the way of the unexplored territory, so no adventurers have been able to go in, which is why the guild put out a bounty on it. Lost examines the area and finds some scorch marks on one of the broken pillars, so now that he has confirmation that the Phoenix was indeed here, he throws a rock out into the room to make noise and lure the Phoenix to his location. Before long, the Phoenix makes an appearance in all its blazing glory, and the group is ready to take it on. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Amherst is sitting at her desk, bored out of her mind, when all of a sudden, Ralma walks in. Amherst is immediately intrigued and rushes up to Ralma to be the first to greet her. Ralma is surprised by how nice Amherst is being, considering the fact that she's a guild staff member, and she's right to be skeptical since Amherst is usually anything but nice when it comes to adventurers. But after one look at Ralma, Amherst could tell that she's no ordinary adventurer. Amherst has no idea who Ralma is or what her title may be, but with all the expensive magic items Ralma is wearing, Amherst is sure she must be rich. She asks how she can help Ralma, so Ralma tells her she wants to meet with the guild branch president. Amherst is a bit taken aback since the branch president never accepts visitors, so she asks if Ralma has some sort of appointment, but Ralma never made one. Amherst then asks if Ralma happens to be a friend of the branch president, but Ralma denies that, although she does have a relationship with the branch president, but it's more like she wants to kill him. After Ralma says this, Amherst says she can't help since Ralma just admitted to trying to kill the branch president. Her nice act also disappears as she starts calling Ralma an idiot, but Ralma doesn't have time to deal with this, so she decides to just commit arson and get it over with already. Amherst runs away and Ralma starts aiming for the branch president's office, but before she fires her shot, Handsome walks up behind her and stops her. He tells Ralma that she can talk to him if she needs anything, and he also informs Amherst that Ralma is known as the Fire God, and if she wanted to, she could turn everyone in this building to ash, so Amherst better leave before she makes Ralma mad again. Back in the labyrinth, the Phoenix hasn't come down at all, so neither the swordsman nor Narcena are going to be able to attack it. With how things are going, Lost wishes he had brought a bow instead of a sword, but Narcena thinks they should be fine since it's not like the Phoenix can attack them from way up there. She was wrong, the Phoenix totally can attack from that distance, and it aimed its fireball straight at Narcena, so Lost had to jump in to save her. After he gets her to safety, he explains that while the Phoenix also attacks with its claws and fiery body, it can also launch long-distance fireballs, which makes it tricky to handle. Back at the guild, Ralma speaks with Handsome in his office, and before they start, he asks her if her complaint is about the situation in the labyrinth as well. Ralma is surprised that he would mention that, so Handsome explains that he just had a couple of adventurers complain to him about the dangerous conditions within the labyrinth. Ralma asks how he responded to their complaint, but all Handsome did was tell the adventurer to leave town if he doesn't like the working conditions. That doesn't seem fair, but that's beside the point because Ralma has a different complaint to make. She has noticed that there are a lot of thugs in this city acting as adventurers, and she believes the guild is intentionally bringing them here. Handsome is stone-faced and denies her claim. That's not the only thing Ralma wanted to talk about. There's also the matter of that giant pillar on the edge of the city, and the others like it all over town because she has a bad feeling about them. Handsome denies knowing anything about that, but Ralma accuses him of lying because for adventurer towns like these, the guild branch president is basically the king, so there's no way that Handsome could be the acting guild president and not have any idea about what those towers are. Handsome asks her if she's got any proof of her claims because if not, she should just leave if she doesn't like the situation here. That's another reason Ralma is suspicious, because not only did the guild bring those borderline criminals as adventurers, all the decent adventurers who complain about the guild's actions are told to leave the town. Ralma is just speculating here, but she thinks the guild might be planning something that involves sacrificing a bunch of adventurers in this town. So they are filling it with criminals who no one would miss and telling all the decent people to leave instead. And that sounds a lot like someone is planning a labyrinth rampage. Down in the labyrinth, the group is still having trouble dealing with the Phoenix and its fireballs. So far, none of them have been hit, but with all this fire, sooner or later, all the oxygen in the room is going to be burnt up, and they won't be able to stay any longer if that happens. Right now, the Phoenix is just trying to drive them out to protect its territory since it knows it can't beat the 5 of them in a fight, and that means they can escape if they need to. But they are here on a quest to take this thing down. So they got no choice but to fight it. Steve asks Armia if she knows how to use water magic, and it's not her specialty, but she says she can cast a water area attack. Even if she can't completely wipe out the Phoenix, if she can at least take out a bunch of its feathers, then it should be enough to bring the monster to the ground and allow Seed to finish it off. There's still a bit of a problem since it will take Armia a while to cast her spell, but until then, Seed promises that he will make sure she isn't harmed. Lost and Arsena are also going to be there to help, so she can rest assured that the plan will work. Armia agrees to do it, so everyone charges forward and begins drawing the Phoenix attention. While they have it distracted, Lara tells Armia to get ready so she begins casting her spell and forms a water arrow. Once she is done casting, she fires it at the Phoenix, and the spell takes out one of the monster's wings, so it falls into Seed's range of attack. Once the opportunity is presented, Seed draws his sword and stabs into the Phoenix's chest, but the cut was too shallow to be fatal, so the Phoenix is able to fly back up and perch on a nearby pillar. They may not have been able to take it down with that strike, but the wound Seed inflicted has done a considerable amount of damage to the Phoenix, so if they keep up this pace, they should be able to defeat it. Back at the guild, Handsome tries to dismiss Ralma's claim that a labyrinth rampage will occur, but given the recent events that have taken place in this town, she believes is more than likely to happen. The most concerning indicator is the incident with the Hydra evolving outside the labyrinth, and as much as Handsome has been trying to ignore the problems that have been arising, you can't deny that the ambient mana levels in this area have been insanely high recently. In fact, while that conversation was going on, the Phoenix down in the labyrinth began taking advantage of the high mana levels and started evolving. Lost's group sees this, but by the time they realize what's going on, it's too late to stop it because the Phoenix is already transformed and is now glowing bright blue. Narcena is confused because Lost told her evolutions are supposed to be rare, and Lost is just as confused as she is because 2 high-level evolutions happening in the span of a few days is completely unheard of. Armia starts freaking out after the monster evolves, and if she ends up passing out in fear like last time, since monsters feed on fear, she's basically going to become a power plant for the Phoenix. On top of that, if Armia isn't able to overcome her fear on her own, then she's always going to be a useless adventurer. The Phoenix catches a whiff of Armia's fear and immediately locks in on her, spitting an extra large fireball in her direction. There's plenty of time to dodge, so Lara yells for Armia to run, but Armia is frozen stiff by fear, so Lara is forced to run up and drag her out of the way, but they aren't going to be able to get out of the way in time. At the last second, before the two could become charcoal, Seed jumps in and slashes the fireball in 2. He made a promise that he would not let Armia be hurt, and no matter what, he's going to keep his word, so he pleads with Armia to get back on her feet and fight with him. Hearing this, Armia finally snaps out of it and realizes that her friends are going to die if she doesn't get her act together. So she stands and apologizes to them, but she's ready to cast her spell, but she's going to need them to buy her some time. Narcena is the first to run out and attack the Phoenix, since it's within her strike range, but even though she got a clean hit off on it, the Phoenix took no damage and Narcena's fist catches on fire. Luckily, it was just her glove that was on fire, but now she's starting to reconsider the viability of boxing the Firebird. The Phoenix comes back for round 2, and Narcena has no way of defending herself, so Lost jumps in and blocks its attack with his sword. Unfortunately, the Phoenix's flames are insanely hot, so while he manages to save Narcena from getting burned by using his sword, he no longer has a sword to use. Thankfully, while Narcena and Lost were engaged with the Phoenix, Armia had enough time to finish casting her next spell, and while it's difficult to perform 2 attack spells in a row, she managed to successfully fire a massive ice arrow at the phoenix and take out one of its wings. Sieg then runs out in an attempt to finish off the phoenix, but at the last second, it starts flying again and Armia doesn't have enough energy to fire another spell, so it looks like they might be screwed. But just then, Narcina comes up with an idea and starts climbing up using some broken pillars until she's above the phoenix. And now that she has the high ground, she uses a spirit kick to knock the phoenix back to the ground, and the second she does, Lofts shows up and uses his dagger to finish it off. After the phoenix disappears, everyone begins congratulating Armia for doing such a good job since they never could have defeated the phoenix without her attack magic. Armia is so glad that she finally made herself useful that she breaks out in tears and thanks everyone for their support. While Armia goes to pick up the magic crystal, Sieg and Lyra talk to one another, and they comment on how Lofts didn't end up transforming like he did last time. They have no idea what happened to him back then, but until Sieg can figure out what's going on with him, he will have to keep a close eye on Lost. The group returns to the inn after that, and Ralma is already there waiting for them. She congratulates Lost for successfully taking down the phoenix, and Lost appreciates it, but he wonders how Ralma could have possibly known about that. Ralma mentions that she met this particular guild receptionist earlier today, and she told Ralma everything about Lost's mission in exchange for some money. Since Lost and the others came back alone, Ralma assumed they must have succeeded, and that means they will get a lot of money from it, so she asks Lost to treat her to dinner. Lost ends up agreeing, but he knows Ralma can't handle her alcohol, so he asks her to hold back, but she's not going to listen to him. Once the food arrives, Narcina tells Ralma that the food here is wonderful, but Ralma says she prefers the food they serve back at the mansion. Armia is confused when Ralma mentions a mansion, so since none of the others seem to know about Narcina's family, Ralma explains that Narcina is the daughter of Earl and Alestria. This shocks everyone, but is especially shocking to Lost because he finally realizes that the girl he saved all those years ago was really Narcina. Later that day, Handsome goes to meet with the guild branch president in his office and informs him that there was yet another mutation, but he also has other news to report. So he tells the branch president that Ralma is in town, and this pleases the president since having his disciple around is going to be helpful. The next day, Lofts and Narcina are in the guild to exchange the Phoenix magic gem for money, but when Amherst brings out their payment, Narcina is outraged because it looks way too small. Phoenix gems are meant to be really valuable, and on top of that, this particular Phoenix was evolved, so it should be worth a whole lot more than usual. So Amherst must be trying to scam them if she says this is the only money they will receive. Now, Amherst may be a money-hungry opportunist, but she's no thief, so she assures Narcina that the money in that pouch is large enough to cover the value of the Phoenix gem and encourages her to take a look for herself. Normally, the guild pays adventurers in silver coins, but it would take hundreds of thousands of silver coins to pay for the gem, so Amherst opted to exchange everything for gold coins instead to make it easier to carry. Narcina is stunned once she sees that Amherst was telling the truth, and she doesn't really know what to say at this point, so Lofts just tells her to accept the coins already and pays Amherst her fee before walking off without another word. Amherst is always happy to receive money, but she noticed that Lofts seemed a lot more quiet than he usually is, so she asks Narcina if anything happened between the two of them. Narcina follows Lost outside, and the two of them sit down to have a snack, but Lofts still isn't saying anything, so Narcina is forced to break the silence and says there's something she's been meaning to ask Lost about. Since they just got paid a large sum of money, she asks if he would like to rent a detached house with her. Lost is taken aback by such a sudden request, but Narcina has a good reason for it. With the funds they currently have available, it is much more economical and secure to rent a private house rather than continuously staying in a hotel. And Narcina already went through the trouble of assessing the current housing market, and not only do they have enough money to rent a house, they could even buy one if they wanted. Something I can't relate to. Lost agrees with everything Narcina has said, but he asks if there is a particular reason she's bringing this up now, like some kind of complaint about Mary's hotel or something. But Narcina says there's nothing inherently wrong with the hotel. It's comfortable and has great food, which makes it extremely popular, but precisely because it's so popular, his place is always crowded and Narcy won't admit it, but she really wants to have a place where she can have nice long chats with Lost without any interruptions, and then from there, maybe they will grow close enough to have a more physical connection. Narcina starts getting embarrassed by her unholy thoughts, and Lost has no idea what she's thinking, but he tells her that it's still too early for them to buy a house together. He believes it's better if they save their money in case of a future emergency, and besides, they still have to consider this situation with the others. After they got back from the Phoenix hunt, Sieg suggested that they should all form a permanent party together since they work together really well. And although Lost hasn't given him an answer yet, he is seriously considering it as an option. If they plan to go into the deeper floors of the labyrinth eventually, then Lost and Arsena are going to have a difficult time making it on their own. That's why Lost wants to add new members to the team, and he's specifically talking about C, because he is clearly a very strong adventurer. Arsena doesn't want to have to share Lost's attention, but she can't deny that he is right about needing strong teammates, so she ends up agreeing to form a party with C and the others. Later that day, Lost and Arsena meet up with the others and agree to merge parties with them. So C proposes a toast to celebrate their new party. Mary overhears this and decides to treat everyone to a special meal, and after they are all done eating, Armia is pretty much in a food coma. Since it's getting pretty late, Lara decides to take Armia to bed, so she picks her up and starts dragging her upstairs. Lara continues walking to the stairs with Armia, but as she's about to head up, Arsena comes up to her and says there's something she wants to talk to her about. They head up together, and after getting Armia into bed, Arsena tells Lara about the conversation she had with Lost earlier about buying a house together. Lara is impressed by how bold Arsena was to ask Lost to live with her, but Arsena says Lost rejected her idea, so she's starting to think he might hate her. Lara assures Arsena that Lost doesn't hate her, and it's much more likely that he just doesn't want to rush into things because he cares about her so much. Lost doesn't seem like the kind of person to be shy about this kind of stuff, but every man has their own personality, so Lara advises Arsena to be patient with him. Arsena thanks Lyra for the good advice and says she is glad she came to Lyra for help because she knew Lyra would have good relationship advice to give, but all Arsena's praise just reminds Lyra of the fact that she has never had a boyfriend. While Lara and Arsena were talking upstairs, Lost and C were having a conversation on the same topic, and C thinks Lost should just agree to live with Arsena. It's not like they are getting married or anything, and Arsena clearly admires him a lot, so it wouldn't hurt her feelings if he refused. He asks Lost if he dislikes the idea of living with Arsena, but that's not true at all. She's the one who gave him hope when he was at the lowest point in his life, and she even came all the way to this city just to form a party with him, so he could never hate her. But C can tell that Lost is still too embarrassed to admit that he likes her. Back to Lara and then Arsena's conversation, Lara starts talking about her romantic history, and how when she lived in the royal capital, several men were trying to earn her affection, so much so that they would join her party just to get close to her. C was one of these guys, and one day while he wasn't around, another guy tried getting frisky with Lyra completely unprompted, but she refused to let it happen, so she knocked him out and dragged him outside. She was willing to let it go, but when Sieg found out, forgiveness wasn't an option, so he yeeted the guy out of the city, and then he vanished from the city as well. Lyra has no idea what C was thinking at the time, but C confides in Lost about the same story and explains that he was angry at himself for not being there to protect Lyra, so he didn't know how to face her. After he left the royal capital, a lot of time passed and C ended up coming to this city for a mission. But he never could have expected that he would run into Lyra here, and to top it off, she was even willing to form a party with him after learning of his mission, even though she must have been angry at him. Although Lyra was never angry at him to begin with, she was just upset that he disappeared without talking to her at all, and since then she's had no idea how Z feels about her. Just then, Sheetal walks into the room and she says that if Lyra is this bothered by it, then she must have feelings for him. Downstairs, Z apologizes to Lost for making him listen to his story, but back to the initial topic, he asks Lost once more why he refused to live with Arsena when she asked him to. Lost isn't entirely against the idea, and in fact, it made him happy when she said she wanted to live with him, but there is something he wanted to confirm before he made any decisions. Just then, Amber shows up at the inn, and she's been looking for Lost because she has prepared the investigative report he asked for. Sieg is a bit confused because he didn't think the guild offered private investigations, but Amber's isn't doing this because of the guild. Lost had personally asked her to do a little research for him, which is why she's here after hours. She asks Lost if it's alright for her to talk about this with someone else at the table, but Lost trusts Sieg, so he says it's fine for him to know. So Embers begins her report on Arsena. Arsena is the only daughter of the Earl of Analestria, and normally Arsena and whomever she chose to marry would inherit the title from her father, but one day she suddenly said she wanted to become an adventurer. It isn't unheard of for a noble person to become an adventurer, but no parent would approve of their only child taking on such a dangerous job, so the Earl was initially against the idea. However, that all changed because one day Arsena woke up and her hair had randomly turned blue. The main reason Lost didn't recognize her at first was because of her different hair color, and while he knew it had changed, he never expected that it all changed overnight. The cause of Arsena's hair color change is still unknown, but when it happened, the Earl suddenly stopped objecting to Arsena's wish to become an adventurer. Lost wonders why the Earl would change his mind so abruptly, so Sieg theorizes that Narcena might soon die, so her father is trying to give her the freedom to enjoy herself before she dies. That's certainly a possibility, but Narcena is currently strong enough to punch a phoenix out of the sky, so she doesn't seem like she's going to be dying anytime soon. Regardless of the reason, the fact of the matter is that Narcena has her father's consent to be here, which is what Lost was worried about. He didn't want to doubt Narcena when she said she was allowed to come here, but there was always the chance that she was lying because she wanted to be close to him, so he had to make sure she had consent. After Amherst has been paid, she leaves because she's not interested in this conversation, and once she's gone, Sieg asks Lost what his plan would have been if he discovered that Narcena's father objected to her adventurer status. First off, Lost would have told her to go home temporarily to try and convince her parents properly, but even if that didn't work, he would still offer Narcena as much help as necessary, although it seems like he won't have to worry about that now. The girls upstairs are laying all the facts out, and basically, Narcena is the daughter of an earl, yet she trained incredibly hard, dropped everything to come here when she found out that Lost got kicked out of his party, and to top it off, she boldly asked him to live with her. They are all really impressed with how proactive Narcena is with her romantic pursuit, and Lyra wishes she could do the same, so the girls come up with a plan to make that happen. They take Lyra downstairs and force her to confess her feelings to Sieg, so she asks him if they can have a private chat outside. Sieg doesn't know what's going on, but he can see that she's serious about this, so he agrees to go with her, and while they are outside, she works up the courage to ask Sieg to be her partner. Sieg doesn't see what the big deal is since they are already a part of the same party, but that's not what Lyra meant. She clarifies that she is talking about being partners for life, and when she says this, it finally dawns on Sieg that she's talking about a romantic partnership. All the girls are eagerly spying on the conversation from the door to see what Sieg says, but he's so too flustered to give an answer right now, so he tells her he will think about it. Lyra isn't satisfied with this because she just poured her heart out, and all Sieg could say is that he will think about it. But then again, Sieg has never been the type of guy to plan ahead for this sort of thing, so she understands why he would want time to think about it, and she's willing to wait. The girls are all glad that things worked out between those two, but then Lost turns to Narcena and asks her if she has time to talk with him tomorrow because there's something important he wants to tell her. Down in the labyrinth, a group of rookie adventurers have been cornered by an orc on the upper floors, and they have no chance of beating it, so they all try to hide until it leaves the area. Luckily, the orc doesn't notice them as it passes, but when everyone tries to make it to the exit, another orc shows up and blocks their path. To make things worse, the first orc is also doubling back, so in no time, the group is going to be trapped on both sides if they don't do something quickly. But not to worry, because the leader of the group planned for a situation like this to make sure everyone survives, which is why he brought Keith. But as for poor Keith, yeah, he's not making it out of this one because they're using him as bait to lure the orcs while they escape. Meanwhile, in town, Lost and the others are having breakfast together, but Narcena is so lost in thought that she can barely focus on her food. Sieg and Lyra are starting to get worried about her, and they assume she's acting this way because Lost said he had something important to tell her, but he never told her what it's about or when they would have this conversation. So she's constantly daydreaming about what it might be. Lyra tells Lost he should probably hurry up and have that discussion with Narcena, but Lost doesn't want to rush into it because it's a very serious matter. However, if he doesn't get it over with soon, Narcena is going to start eating flowers at some point, so he decides to have that talk after all. He goes over to Narcena, and as soon as he calls her name, she nervously jumps up and asks what he needs. Lost tells her that he wants to have that discussion they talked about earlier, and Narcena is eagerly awaiting what Lost has to say, but before he could actually say anything, the door to the inn swings open and somehow, Keith managed to survive being abandoned in the labyrinth. Sheila seems to know who he is, and she is really worried about him, so she runs over to check on him and his injuries. A little while later, Lost is fine healing Keith, so he tells everyone that the kid is going to be alright since his injuries weren't as bad as they looked. For now, Lyra and Sheila are going to be looking after them, but the others are a bit confused to hear this because it makes sense for Lyra to look after him since she's a healer. But why does Sheila need to be there? Mary comes over and explains that Sheila has been friends with Keith since they were little. Keith is a labyrinth orphan, and he's the same age as Sheila, so Mary couldn't just abandon him, which is why she'd often let him hang out and eat with them. She grew fond of him, so she would have happily let him work at the inn, but Keith wanted to become an adventurer, so she let him follow his dreams. He even looked so happy when he told her he got accepted into his first party, but look at how that turned out for him. Lost apologizes to Narcena, but he's going to have to talk to her later because there's something he needs to take care of first. Lost already called in a favor to help track down the people that ditched Keith in the labyrinth, and the guild members have already beaten them up pretty badly for what they did. They offer to let Lost decide the punishment for the treacherous party, but Lost thinks they have been beaten badly enough already, so he tells everyone to cut the party loose, but he makes it clear that he never wants to see the party anywhere near this city again, so the party runs off. Amherst understands why Lost asked for everyone's help to punish that party, but disputes between adventurers are meant to be handled by the guild, so she can't condone them taking actions into their own hands. The adventurers are enraged to hear that since the guild did absolutely nothing to stop those people from abandoning Keith in the first place, and it's not like they were taking any other actions to get justice. Amherst admits that the guild's response to these kinds of situations is pretty lacking, but she has orders from management that she has to follow. Just then, Handsome shows up and starts scolding the adventurers for daring to take matters into their own hands and banish that party. He tells them they had no right to do that, but the adventurers clap back and yell that Handsome has no right to say that to them when he did literally nothing to solve the problem, but Lost tells everyone to calm down and says he will talk to Handsome to air out their grievances. Once Lost meets with Handsome, he explains everything that happened, and while Handsome still isn't pleased that the adventurers handled it by themselves, now that he knows the full story, he understands why they did it. Lost asks him why he doesn't do anything to prevent these kinds of situations, because other cities at least have policies in place to protect Labyrinth orphans from being treated as bait, but Handsome counters with a simple question and asks if any of those policies would be enforceable down in the Labyrinth. Cities can make all the fancy rules and regulations they want, but if it doesn't result in any beneficial changes, then there's no point in wasting time and money on it. Lost asks if Handsome intends to just abandon all the Labyrinth orphans that end up getting used as bait, but he tells Lost he is mistaken about something. Handsome has always made it clear that anyone who doesn't like the way this city operates should leave, and that's not just because he doesn't like complainers, it's because he believes people should only become adventurers if they can handle it. This may be an adventurer's guild, but they've never once forced anyone to become an adventurer, and the same goes for Keith, since if he can't handle the risks that come with the job, he should have chosen a different path in life. Lost wants to tell him he's wrong, but he kind of agrees with Handsome about that. However, he still believes that there must be some way to deal with the situation and save the Labyrinth orphans. Handsome gets up and recalls something that a man once said. As an adventurer, the incompetent are as good as dead, so it's best to be prepared from the start. Lost should remember those words because Handsome was the one who said that to him years ago, and to jog his memory, Handsome shows Lost the scar he got from their time together. Years ago, when Lost was still starting out as an adventurer, he and Handsome got suckered into being the luggage carriers for a party of adventurers, and Handsome was being treated particularly poorly, so Lost offered to help him carry some of his luggage to lighten Handsome's load. However, Handsome refused to accept any pity from someone as incompetent as Lost, so he told him to shut up and stop talking to him. Later that night, while the rest of the party was staying warm near the fire, Handsome sitting out in the cold on his own away, and he is really regretting his choice to accept this job, even if it paid decent money. A few hours later, when everyone has gone to bed, Lost wakes Handsome up and warns him that there are a bunch of goblins approaching them. He tells Handsome to warn the others while he keeps watch a little longer, and Handsome does as he is instructed. So once everyone is up, Lost fills them in on the situation. The others can't believe it, so they ask Lost if he's sure about what he saw, but there's no doubt in Lost's mind that there are goblins approaching, and there are too many of them to even count. Once the group sees it for themselves, they are in shock because there's no way they can defeat a horde of goblins that large. Their best chance at surviving is if they run away, but the group leader thinks it'll be too risky to run away like this, so to buy some time, he and the others in the party decide to use Lost and Handsome as bait to distract the goblins while they escape. Before Handsome realizes what's going on, both he and Lost have been chucked off the side of the cliff and left behind. Handsome tries to call out for help, but Lost tells him that those guys won't be helping them. In fact, this might be the reason the party decided to accept incompetent people like them in the first place. The situation infuriates Handsome, but he can't do anything about it until they get out of here, so he and Lost promise to make it out of this alive with one another and get their revenge on that party for abandoning them. The two battle against the goblins for a long time, but ultimately, there's not much they can do to defeat such a large horde when there's only two of them, so they are forced to hide in a hollow tree to avoid the goblins for a little while. Handsome is starting to feel like there's no hope of surviving the goblin horde after all, and he can't stand the fact that the other party members are going to survive by sacrificing him. About that, not many people know this, but goblin hordes actually tend to prefer attacking larger groups of people, so if the goblins locate the party, they'll redirect all their forces to attack them. Just as Lost says this, the goblins locate the party and all start running off to attack them. And while the party is being massacred, Lost and Handsome are able to sneak out of their hiding spot undetected. Handsome thinks those guys deserve to die at the hands of the goblins after what they did to him and Lost, but Lost still wishes he could help them since he doesn't like the idea of anyone dying, although it's not like he has the power to save them. So he tells Handsome they should start heading back to town. Handsome is about to start following Lost, but all of a sudden, he falls to the ground in pain because he has a severe injury on his arm from when he fought the goblin. Lost is shocked and asks why Handsome didn't tell him about this sooner, but Handsome didn't want to make himself a burden when they were in a life or death situation. Lost begins trying to heal Handsome, but Handsome tells him to stop because he's going to attract the attention of the goblins if he keeps this up. He tells Lost to just leave him behind because this is his own fault for being incompetent, so a weakling like him has no right to live. Lost yells that he's wrong and tells him that while the world may be harsh on incompetent people like them, there's still always hope for salvation. After that, Lost and Handsome worked together and broke through the goblins' defense lines to make it back to the city. In Handsome's eyes, Lost was his salvation, but what Lost said about the world being harsh on incompetent people was still true. The only difference is that the incompetent ones on that day were the adventurers who abandoned them without knowing the behavior patterns of the goblins they were fleeing from. After Lost and Handsome returned to the city, they went their separate ways and Handsome met a certain elder who took him in. Handsome learned a lot of things from this person, and eventually he was able to stand on his own feet as a competent adventurer. The elder who took him in as the guild master missed, and that explains how Handsome became a guild employee and is acting as the guild master's right-hand man. But Handsome didn't say all this just because he wants to reminisce about the old days. He is greatly indebted to Lost for saving him on that day, so he wants to return the favor. He tells Lost to leave this city for his own good, and he's not saying this as a threat, but as a genuine warning because he doesn't want Lost to get caught up in what's about to come. Lost doesn't really understand what Handsome is trying to say, so as he leaves Handsome's office, he returns to the other adventurers and tells them that he couldn't get Handsome to budge on his policies. Just then, Amherst pulls him aside and tells Lost that there are actually a lot of people here who don't agree with the way the guild master is running things here, which is why she has a personal request for him. Later that day, Lost goes to Narcina and talks to her about the request Amherst gave him. Apparently, there have been a lot of monsters appearing on the roads near the city, so she asked Lost to take care of it before there are any civilian casualties as a result. Narcina understands, but she wonders why the guild hasn't put out a bounty for those monsters, but something like that would require Handsome to sign off on it, and he's not going to do that. There's also the issue of the criminal adventurers all over the city, so Lost offers to help deal with that as well. Narcina understands that Lost is doing a good thing, but it sounds like an awful lot of extra work for them. Lost tells her she doesn't need to worry about that since Amherst said she would give them bonus pay for dealing with the monsters on the road. But since this isn't a guild-approved mission, she's going to be paying the reward out of her own pocket. She really doesn't want to, but she feels like it's only fair since Lost is going out of his way to help. Later that day, Handsome goes to meet with the guild master and brings him a letter that arrived from the Prime Minister. The letter is basically a reminder from the Prime Minister for the guild to keep an eye on Narcina, but Handsome doesn't understand why Narcina would be important enough for the Prime Minister of the land to be so interested in her. He asks Miss for an explanation, so Miss tells him about the story of the evil dragon and the sleeping princess. It is a popular fairy tale in this world where the princess sacrifices herself to defeat the evil dragon, but Miss tells Handsome that it is not a mere story. It is a prophecy that must be fulfilled, and the sign that someone has been chosen by the gods to sacrifice themselves as the sleeping princess is the sudden manifestation of blue hair, a description that perfectly matches Narcina. The group heads out to the plains and soon spot the horde of goblins that have been attacking travelers in the area. Lara suggests that they could sneak up and ambush the goblins or attack them from a distance, but Lost thinks the best course of action would be to attack them directly. If they attack from a distance, it will be easier for some goblins to survive and escape, and then they would just attack again sometime in the future. But if they fight head-on, they can make sure they wipe every single goblin out. In that case, Sieg suggests that they should circle around the goblins and attack them from the front, so everyone agrees and start walking across the field. By coincidence, this happens to be the same place where Lost and Narcina first met all those years ago, but unlike back when the horde of goblins attacked, Narcina isn't a helpless princess anymore, and Lost is now a capable fighter, and they've both got each other's backs. After fighting for a while, all the goblins had been defeated, and the group was getting ready to head back to town, but all of a sudden, the ground begins violently shaking, both in the plains and within the city, and it looks like the guild master knows something about this. Once the shaking finally stops, Lost and the others rush back to town to check if Mary is alright, and thankfully, no one was injured and there wasn't much damage to the inn. But that doesn't mean everything is fine though, because a second later, an adventurer comes running in, and he says he's looking for Lost because Marnell needs his help in the town square. Lost and the others head over to the town square to see what the problem is, and when they get there, Marnell is relieved to see that Lost actually showed up. He points to the fields outside the city, and even though Lost and the other just finished dealing with a huge horde of goblins, there's somehow an even bigger horde of goblins outside there. There are even a few hobgoblins mixed in there, so if those goblins were to attack the town right now after all the chaos from the earthquake, it would lead to an absolute massacre. Marnell doesn't want to let that happen, which is why he wants to take the goblin out before they make it to the city, and he would like Lost to help out. However, he hasn't reported this to the guild yet, so it is likely they won't get paid for their work, but Lost and the others say they are fine with that as long as the town remains safe. They all head out together and begin slaying the goblins one after another, and when Lost goes up against the hobgoblin, he manages to slice his arm off in one go. However, to his utter shock, the hobgoblin starts hurling death threats at him, and the regular goblins start doing the same. Everyone is freaked out because as far as they know, goblins are meant to be able to talk, and this is the first time they've ever seen something like this. But nevertheless, the goblins' strange behavior doesn't change their mission, so Lost tells everyone to stay focused on slaying the goblins as quickly as possible. Eventually, they manage to defeat all the goblins, and the only one left is the injured hobgoblin, but before it vanishes like the rest of them, it proclaims that even though the humans managed to win this battle, it is sure they will lose in the end because after what's coming, not a single human will be left alive. After the hobgoblin vanishes, it drops its magic crystal, and from the structure of the crystal, it looks like it was an evolved hobgoblin. But even so, Lost has never heard of an evolution granting a monster the ability to speak, so he is still unsure of what could have caused it. Just then, one of Marnell's friends comes running up and tells them that there's more trouble over by the labyrinth entrance. There are a ton of goblins gathered outside the entrance, at least 3 times the amount of those they fought outside the city, and their numbers are increasing by the minute. There's no way they could possibly handle all these goblins at once, so Lost tells everyone that the best course of action is to retreat for now. But that doesn't mean they are running away because Lost plans to head to the guild and gather more adventurers to help defeat the goblins. Or at least that was the plan, but when they get to the guild, it looks like every adventurer in town is already getting ready to go fight the goblins, and they seem unusually enthusiastic about it. The reason the adventurers are so motivated is because the guild put out a bounty on the goblins that escaped the labyrinth, and it's quite a generous amount at that. Part of the bounty is even paid in advance, so there are a bunch of adventurers who just end up taking the money and disappear to buy some non-existent milk. Marcena asks why they keep giving out advance payments if they know people like that are going to take advantage of it, and Amherst would personally like to stop wasting money, but it's an order from Handsome, so she has no choice but to go along with it. Marnell doesn't think this is such a bad thing, because regardless of their selfish motivations, if all these adventurers go to fight the goblins, the town will be saved. However, C wonders if Handsome might have known something like this would happen since all the money they are giving out as rewards would have had to have been gathered weeks in advance. Just then, Ralma shows up, and Lost is surprised to see that she's still in town. But since she's here, he asks if she expected something like this to happen as well. For such a large number of goblins to escape the labyrinth at once, there could only be one possible explanation: a labyrinth rampage. Marcena doesn't know what a labyrinth rampage is, but Amherst recalls reading about it in an old book, so she leads everyone into the back to take a look at it. A labyrinth rampage is a phenomenon where countless monsters emerge from the labyrinth at once, and while it usually only lasts one day, there have been reports of rampages lasting up to a week, and in a case like that, any nearby cities or villages would be overwhelmed with monsters and eventually become ruins. The rampage is caused when the ambient magic in the labyrinth exceeds a certain level, and the only way to prevent it is to continuously slay all the monsters in there, while also allowing the new monsters to spawn in the labyrinth to absorb some of that magic. Now that Amherst thinks about it, she recalls that the whole reason the Adventurers Guild was created in the first place was to ensure that the magic levels in the labyrinth are kept at a reasonable level. That's really useful information, so the others are a bit upset that Amherst didn't mention it till now, but in her defense, it was only mentioned once during guild staff orientation, and no one pays attention to that. Ralman doesn't blame Amherst for not taking that part of their orientation seriously, since the last time a labyrinth rampage actually happened was over 100 years ago. But then again, 100 years isn't that long when we're talking about a disaster like a dungeon rampage. It is still recent enough for there to be well-documented reports about it, so anyone who's been in the adventurer business for a while should have heard about it. Marnell finds it strange that even though Marmot is one of the largest adventurer cities out there, it wasn't able to slay enough monsters to keep the magic levels in check. It's almost as if this rampage was intentionally caused, but speculation won't get them anywhere right now since the rampage is already in progress, so Ralma asks Lost what he wants to do about it. A little while later, Lost and a couple of others are helping the people in the area move all their stuff out, but Narcena asks if all this is really necessary. Lost doesn't like the idea of using other people's stuff either, but if the rampage ends up lasting several days, then no matter how hard the adventurers try, there's no way they will be able to last long enough. Inevitably, the city is going to suffer damages, so the best they can do is get ready and create a barricade with all this stuff to minimize that damage. Down the road, Marnell is yelling at Keith and the other kids for trying to go fight the goblins as well. Keith and the others think it's the right thing to do since this place is their hometown and they want to fight to defend it. But in all honesty, Keith and the others would probably die the second they set foot on that battlefield, so Marnell won't let them go. He tells them that they can fight for their home in the future when they are more competent as adventurers, but getting themselves killed won't do anyone any good, so if they really want to help, Marnell suggests that they should play support roles for the adventurers engaged in combat. Things like transporting injured people or sending messages back and forth will help the fight go smoother in the long run. Keith and the others understand what he's saying, so they all agree to support the adventurers and run off to get started. A little while later, the goblins show up at the city entrance, and the adventurers are all posted outside to intercept them, so as the battle begins, they seal off the entrance with some carts and begin attacking the goblins inside. It is an intense battle, as there are even mid-level monsters showing up, and Lost hadn't expected the monsters to show up in just half a day, so he blames himself for being unprepared. However, Ralma assures him that it's not his fault since along with everyone else, this is Lost's first time experiencing a labyrinth rampage, so no one expects him to be fully prepared. But if he still feels guilty about it, then he's just going to have to fight with all his heart to make sure everyone survives. Aside from the goblins, there are also 2 liches floating in the air, and these ones can talk as well, so they start yelling that they will kill all the humans. But Ralma isn't interested in hearing their chant, so she starts shooting fireballs at the monsters, and Marnell orders everyone to attack at once. With their combined effort, they are able to take out every monster in the initial wave, but just when Ralma thought they were done, a second wave of monsters showed up and attacked. Narcena asks Ralma if she can blow them up with another fireball, but Ralma is exhausted, so she isn't going to be able to help for a while. If that's the case, C decides to handle the monsters instead, and since Lyra is taking care of the healing, Lost decides to join him as well. They both do their best to take on the goblins, and they are holding their ground pretty well, but then C accidentally trips on one of the goblins' clubs, so his defenses are left wide open and the goblin is about to use the opportunity to smash his head in. But at the last second, C's master, Ronaldo, dashes in to save him. This is our first time seeing Ronaldo, but he's the one who trained C and gifted him that magic sword he's always using. However, C isn't the only one who has a history with Ronaldo here because Lost, Narcena, and Ralma all know him as well. Ronaldo was the one who taught Lost how to use a sword, and for a while, he also acted as Narcena's personal swordsmanship teacher, although she ended up deciding to go with martial arts instead. He's also old friends with Ralma, so he jokes about her being a fire demon, and that gets Ralma angry, so she launches a fire blast at him. Ronaldo is easily able to deflect it though, and there's a lot he'd like to say to Ralma, but it looks like there are more important matters to deal with at the moment, so he runs off to deal with the goblins. While Ronaldo is dealing with that, a magic door suddenly opens on the side of a building and Handsome walks out, telling Ralma that Branch President Mist wants to see her. Ralma is a little suspicious about this whole thing, but she agrees to go see Mist. Before she leaves though, Lost asks if he can come along since there's a lot he wants to say to Mist in person. Surprisingly, Handsome says it's fine for Lost to accompany them and even says Narcena should come as well. Handsome starts leading them to Mist's chambers, and Narcena doesn't understand why Mist would want to see her, but Lost tells her everything's going to be fine. Worst case scenario, if Mist tries to do anything, Lost will be there to protect her. However, Ralma corrects Lost because he has no chance in hell of beating Mist in a fight. Mist is even stronger than Ralma is, so she warns Lost not to attack him under any circumstances. But with that said, the second Ralma sees Mist, she launches a massive fireball at his face. Of course, Mist remains completely unharmed, but he scolds Ralma for being so reckless because she nearly burnt his precious clothes. This is the guild branch president, Mist, and he's the last elf alive in this world. Lost and Narcena are still in shock after learning that someone as powerful as Ralma has a master, so Ralma explains that Mist is leagues above her in every way. Elves as a species are extremely proficient in the use of magic, but even among elves, Mist is exceptionally powerful since he has lived for over 600 years and learned all kinds of spells. This whole time, Mist has been staring intently at Narcena. It's starting to make her a little anxious, so Ralma asks Mist why he summoned them here. It has been years since she last saw him, and after she found out he was in this town, he kept avoiding her up till now, so she assumes this isn't meant to be a reunion. Indeed, Mist has something important to tell them, but it's going to be a long story, so he uses magic to conjure up some chairs so everyone can sit. Before they begin, Ralma asks Mist if this was his plan all along. He lured scumbag adventurers into the city and refused to do anything about their criminal conduct because he intended to have them fight the rampage, and the reason Handsome kept telling people to leave town over the smallest complaint was an attempt to allow the kind adventurers to stay out of trouble. All this leads to the conclusion that Mist must have known about the rampage long before it happened, and Mist doesn't deny it since anyone could have figured out that rampage was coming with all the strange things happening in there. Strong monsters had begun showing up on the upper levels, and on top of that, there was an unusually high evolution rate among the monsters, so there were clear signs. But if Mist really knew about it in advance, Narcina asks why he didn't at least warn the people about it ahead of time. Handsome cuts her off and says warning the people would have done nothing to help. They knew a rampage was coming, but they had no idea if it would come in a day, a week, or 10 years, and issuing a warning with no clear time frame would make no difference to their defenses. Even so, it wouldn't make any sense to hide the possibility of such a defeating event occurring, so Ralma assumes there must be some hidden reasons why Mist didn't tell anyone about the rampage. Ralma thinks Mist must have caused the rampage, but even if Mist could control the labyrinth, he wouldn't bother creating so much trouble for himself. He explains that the order to keep the rampage a secret came from his boss, the supervisor of every adventurer's guild in the country. Basically, even though rampages are known to last for several days and could destroy several cities, since the rampage isn't happening anywhere near the royal capital, the higher-ups didn't see it as a threat and decided it would be better to keep it a secret so as to not throw the country into chaos. But that means Marmot and the cities nearby are being sacrificed, which is why Mist took matters into his own hands and set up personal countermeasures against the rampage. Lost and Narcina are asked if they remember all the towers that were constructed across town, because those are likely part of the last resort contingency plan that Mist made. However, before that, he wants to do everything he can to defend the city, so he asks that Ralma step up and help hold off the monsters. No matter how energetic the adventurers outside are, they will eventually get exhausted and will need to take a break, but the countermeasure Mist created requires an incredibly large amount of mana to function, so he needs Ralma to power it. Given the circumstances, Ralma agrees to go back out and act as a battery, but if Mist is asking her to put her life on the line so casually, she asks if he is willing to do the same. Mist confirms this, and he's going to be doing everything within his power to stop the rampage, which is why he and Hansen will be going to the lowest floor of the labyrinth. Narcina is surprised to hear this since she recalls that the bottom of the labyrinth hasn't been found yet, and while that may be true, thanks to a bunch of reports, Mist has been able to pinpoint the final boss's general location. Lost thinks a mission like this is way too risky, but if he and Handsome manage to defeat the Labyrinth Master, then the mana supply that's causing the rampage will be cut off, leading and the rampage will end a lot sooner. After hearing what they had planned, Ralma agrees to do her best to hold off the rampage until he can defeat the Labyrinth Master. Outside, the situation with the rampage hasn't gotten much better, but thanks to the effort of Ronaldo and to a lesser extent C, they have managed to keep the monsters from breaking into the city. But then a lot half orcs start showing up, and Sieg is worried about them breaking through the blockade, so he goes up front and asks Ronaldo to charge at the orcs with him. While the two of them continue fighting, Ralma and the others are brought to the guild courtyard and told to proceed as planned. Ralma finds the device Mist was talking about and places her hand on it to open a door inside. She then gives Lost a warning because even if they are working with Mist for now, he isn't someone who can be trusted, so Lost needs to be careful about him while she's gone. Ralma then says goodbye to Lost before walking into the device and closing the door behind her. The device then powers on, and a blinding light begins pouring out of it as a massive barrier is formed all around the city. The adventurers by the gate have no idea what's going on with the barrier, but they start using it to their advantage and begin run back in for safety. Thankfully, it seems like the orc won't be able to break through anytime soon, so they decide to go handle the monsters that get in before the barrier came up. Meanwhile, Sieg and Ronaldo have just finished dealing with the last orc, so Ronaldo tells Sieg to take a break. Sieg says he can still keep fighting, but Ronaldo can tell that Sieg is out of breath, and if he's tired, he won't be able to fight effectively. Plus, there are plenty of other people, so they should be able to handle the remaining monsters on her own. But that's only because this mysterious wall is keeping the monsters out. Just then, Lost and Narcina show up, and they fill everyone in on the details of what happened and how Ralma is risking her life to keep this barrier up. The barrier is made up of Ralma's magic power, but for the barrier to cover an area this large, it must be consuming a lot of mana, and even if Ralma may have a large mana pool, it is still limited, so she will eventually run out at some point. Normally, if a person runs out of mana, They simply end up passing out from mana exhaustion, but the device Ralma is in forcibly sucks mana out of her body, so as long as the magic barrier is still needed, even if she passed out, the device will continue draining magic from her body until she ends up dead. Another monster appears. This time it's a griffin, which is super powerful. Under normal circumstances, even with the combined effort of every adventurer here, they wouldn't be able to defeat a single griffin, but thankfully, they don't have to fight it since the barrier prevents it from getting into the city. However, its presence is still going to be a problem. The barrier is made from elf technology, so it won't be breached by the attacks from the griffin, but the more damage the barrier takes, the more mana it will need to drain from Ralma to repair itself. If they let it continue attacking the barrier like that, then it won't be long before Ralma dies from mana depletion. Lost refuses to let that happen, so he starts leaving to fight the griffin, but before he goes, Ronaldo stops him and says he doesn't have to do it alone. They are all a team here and Ralma is important to them, so they'll do whatever it takes to make sure she survives. The group runs out of the barrier and towards the horde of goblins and orcs, but the main threat right now is the griffin that's repeatedly striking the barrier, so Ronaldo tells everyone to deal with the orcs quickly so they can focus their attention on the griffin. The group starts laying waste to the small fry monsters on the ground, but all of a sudden, the remaining goblins start backing off because they've realized they have no chance of winning, thus they called in a Fenrir for backup. Narcena has never seen a Fenrir before, but she can already tell that that thing is incredibly strong, and Lost confirms it. The Fenrir has a lightning-fast dash, and while on the ground, it possesses strength equal to that of a griffin, so it won't be easy to beat it. Ronaldo asks Lost if he will be able to handle the Fenrir on his own since he still has to take down the griffin, and Lost thinks he should be able to manage it, so Ronaldo runs off to handle the griffin, while the rest of them take on the Fenrir. Armiette is the first to attack and launches a fireball at the Fenrir, but she wasn't expecting it to be so fast, so she gets caught off guard as the Fenrir charges at her. Luckily, Lost was quick enough to keep up with it, so he jumps in front of Armiette and parries the Fenrir's attacks. Everyone is amazed that Lost is capable of keeping up with the Fenrir's speed on his own, but even so, Lost is still losing. The only thing Lost has been able to do so far is defend himself, so the Fenrir eventually catches Lost lacking and slashes his arm. Lost is in no condition to fight back anymore, so Sieg steps up to keep the Fenrir busy with Armiette until Lyra and Narcena can treat Lost's injury. Lost tries telling Narcena he's okay, but that's clearly not true. Lyra says his arm is barely hanging on by a thread. She's going to be able to heal him, but it'll take a while, so Lost needs to sit still for a bit. Meanwhile, as the griffin was flying in to once again attack the barrier, it finds Ronaldo perched atop the tower, and before the griffin even reached barrier, Ronaldo jumps off and slams it into the ground. The griffin is still alive, but Ronaldo injured its wing pretty badly, so it won't be able to fly for a while, and that makes it a lot easier for Ronaldo to take it down. Meanwhile, Sieg and Armiette are doing a good job keeping the Fenrir busy, but the Fenrir is smart enough to realize that Armiette is an easier target than Sieg, so it howls and calls a lich to take her out. Armiette isn't able to react in time, so she gets knocked out, and Armiette being hurt distracts Sieg so much that the Fenrir is able to knock him down immediately. However, the Fenrir's real target is Lost, so it doesn't finish Sieg off and instead runs to stop Lyra from healing Lost before grabbing him and tossing Lost's unconscious body around. Narcena is enraged that the Fenrir would dare to hurt her dear Lost, so she charges at the Fenrir and yells that she's going to make it pay for what it has done. All things considered, Narcena is doing pretty well against the Fenrir and even manages to knock it away with a powerful kick at one point, but the Fenrir gets back up and starts attacking her with full force until it eventually slashes her arm and causes Narcena to collapse to the ground. The Fenrir then triumphantly stands over Narcena's body thinking it has won, but that's when she reveals that she was just acting as bait this entire time, and in the next moment, Lost jumps up from behind the Fenrir and stabs it in the neck with his dagger. When Narcena saw Lost on the floor earlier, she noticed that he was only pretending to be unconscious and was really healing his arm, so she decides to draw the Fenrir's attention so it would lose focus on Lost and would be susceptible to a surprise attack. Now the Fenrir has been defeated, Narcena's injuries cause her to pass out, so by the time she wakes up, the others have already brought her back inside the barrier. She's surprised that her body doesn't hurt anymore, but with Lost around it would honestly be more surprising if he hadn't healed her. Narcena knows that the Fenrir was taken care of, but she asks what happened to the griffin, so Ronaldo pulls out the griffin's magic gem and says he killed it. And now that the major threats have been taken care of, Ralma should be able to survive a little while longer. But if they want to ensure that she lives past this, they have to hope that Mist really does take down the Labyrinth Master and Handsome actually take out the Labyrinth Master like they said they would. However, there's nothing they can do about it for now, so Lost suggests they should all head back to the inn and rest up. But all of a sudden, Handsome appears behind Narcena, and he seems disappointed that Marcina is still alive since he had intended for her to die in battle today. So he pulls her into a portal so he can finish the job himself. Marnell and the other adventurers have just finished dealing with the last few monsters that were in the town. So as long as this barrier holds up, everyone should be safe now. Keith and the other kids come over to deliver some food to the adventurers and tell them to take a break now that the town is safe, and Marnell appreciates it. But he is too worried about Lofts and the others to relax right now. However, Sheila tells him that Lofts is already back at the inn resting. Marnell is glad to hear this and asks if that means everyone made it out all right, but unfortunately, while Lofts and the others made it back, Narcina wasn't so lucky. Back at the inn, the group is trying to plan out their next move and figure out why Handsome kidnapped Narcina, but Ronaldo believes it's because Narcina is the sleeping princess. Armia finds it hard to believe since she thought the story of the sleeping princess was just a fairy tale, but while some of the details may have been exaggerated, the story is based on real events. The story says that the sleeping princess has the power to put the evil dragon to sleep by sacrificing herself, so Marcina was likely kidnapped so she could be fed to the dragon. Meanwhile, Handsome returns to Mist's room with Narcina, and Mist compliments Handsome for doing such a good job, but the second Marcina realizes Mist is the one behind her kidnapping, she leaps forward to attack him. Unfortunately, Mist has lived long enough to become a Jedi, so he uses the Force to stop Narcina mid-air and bring her down to her knees. Narcina asks him what he intends to do with her, but Mist doesn't give her a direct answer and instead asks if she has heard about the evil dragon. Narcina thinks Mist is mocking her since everyone in this world has heard about the evil dragon, but Mist is serious, so he releases her and asks her to explain what she knows. Narcina talks about how the evil dragon is a terrifying creature that appeared 200 years ago, but a hero suddenly appeared and defeated it. Mist tells her she is mostly correct, but she is missing a few important details. First of all, the hero wasn't actually able to kill the dragon. All he managed to do was send it to where it came from. And the dragon didn't only show up 200 years ago, it also showed up 400, 600, and 800 years ago as well. The cycle of the dragon's appearance repeats every 200 years, and each time so far, the dragon has been defeated by a hero and forced to retreat until it recovers its strength and attacks again. And this is exactly 200 years since the last time the dragon was defeated, so it will be appearing soon. Narcina realizes this is bad news, so she asks if the hero can stop the dragon again this time, but unfortunately, Mist tells her that won't happen. Normally, the hero appears at the same time as the dragon's revival, but so far, there has been no sign of any hero. However, even if there's no hero right now, there is still someone who can put the dragon to sleep, and that person is Narcina. The fact that her hair is blue is all the proof they need to figure out that she is the sleeping princess, since when Maiden is chosen, their hair will suddenly turn blue. Narcina asks if her father knew about this, but it would be hard to imagine someone in a position of power like him would be oblivious to something so important, which is probably why he let Narcina become an adventurer in the first place. Back at the inn, Lost asks Ronaldo if Mist intends to use Narcina to put the dragon to sleep, but Ronaldo doesn't think Mist is the one who made the decision. The order most likely came from his boss, the Chancellor of the Adventurers Guild, and the only thing that man cares about is minimizing the damage caused by the dragon, no matter what it takes. Armia doesn't think that sounds so bad, but Ronaldo reiterates that the Chancellor is only interested in minimizing the damage caused by the dragon, not preventing it entirely. For example, if he had to sacrifice 40 people so that 60 others would survive, you wouldn't hesitate. In fact, the reason this city has no walls is because the Chancellor didn't approve of having a wall built. When the dragon's return approaches, labyrinth stampedes are bound to occur, and the Chancellor was well aware of this, so he planned to let Marmot be destroyed by the stampede to send a message. If a city were completely destroyed, then everyone, from the commoners to the king, would realize the gravity of the situation, and the Chancellor would be given full authority to do whatever it takes to defeat the dragon. Narcina can't believe that the Chancellor is willing to let all the people of Marmot die, but the Chancellor believes this is the only way he can save the world. Each time the dragon shows up, it appears in a different labyrinth, but analyzing the ambient mana and labyrinth activity, the guild was able to deduce that the dragon would appear here, and they've known this for decades. Ronaldo tells the others the same thing, but if they've known that the dragon would show up here for so long, then Seed doesn't understand why they didn't warn the townspeople of the imminent danger. It's clear that the Chancellor intended to let all the people in the town die, but Mist wasn't on board with that idea, so he took desperate measures to construct a barrier around Marmot without the Chancellor finding out. However, if the stampede doesn't end soon, then Ralma's life will be at risk, so Mist is likely going to do everything in his power to defeat the labyrinth boss as quickly as possible. But he also had Handsome kidnap Marcina as an insurance policy to stop the dragon in case he fails his mission. Of course, Ronaldo can't be sure of Mist's intentions without asking him personally, but it's going to be difficult to do that since they don't even know where it is. However, they do know that he is planning to defeat the labyrinth boss, so that must mean he is headed for the deepest part of the labyrinth, so they might be able to find him there. The labyrinth still hasn't been fully explored, so this is going to be a dangerous mission in unknown territory, and Ronaldo wants to make sure everybody is in agreement before they begin. Lost would naturally do whatever it takes to save Narcina, and the others care about her a lot as well, so they all agree to go save her. Down in Mist's office, he, Handsome, and Narcina all step on the magic circle in the middle of the room and are teleported to a wide open area in the labyrinth. At the same time, Lost and the others have entered the labyrinth, and they are surprised to see that there are no monsters nearby, but that's because most of the monsters were forced out of the labyrinth by the stampede. However, it won't be long before new monsters start spawning in, so they need to hurry. Over on Narcina's end, as they walk through the labyrinth floor, they run into a giant cyclops, and monsters like that are extremely high level. So Narcina is wondering what kind of place is this that has monsters like that wandering around. Mist explains that this is the deepest floor of the labyrinth, and over there is the temple where the dungeon boss resides. Narcina is surprised to hear this since she thought this place hadn't been found yet, but that's just because Mist kept it a secret intentionally. Aside from Narcina, the only people who have ever been here are Mist and Handsome, and I guess Lost too since he managed to track Narcina down here. As soon as he spots her, he calls out her name, but his yelling gets the attention of the Cyclops in the area, so the Cyclops stand in Lost way and try to attack him. However, even though those Cyclopses are incredibly powerful, Lost is able to easily outpace them and cut one of the Cyclops' arms off. He then proceeds to slay the remaining Cyclopses, all while his eyes glow red. But when the last Cyclops finally dies, he goes back to normal and turns to his friends to let them know he's alright. Lost then confronts Mist, but Mist seems oddly happy and tells Lost he is glad he made it here in time. He then hands Narcina back over to him without a fight, so Lost asks him if he is trying to trick him or something. Mist tells Lost that he isn't in favor of the Chancellor's methods, so he wants to minimize casualties as much as possible. Ronaldo and Seed don't believe him because he still orchestrated plans that involve sacrificing Ralma, Narcana, and even the morally gray adventurers. But Mist reminds them that no one has died yet, and if they can manage to defeat the labyrinth boss in time, no one will have to die. However, for this to work, he's going to need Lost to be the one to defeat the boss. Of course, Mist still intends to help as much as possible, but the elves are not favored by the gods, so this world belongs to the humans, and as such, it is only fitting that the world be saved by the hands of humans. Mist may be powerful, but he doesn't have much longer to live, so he tells them that they can't rely on him to win for them. Since there's no other choice, everyone agrees to fight the boss, but as they walk towards the temple, Lara asks Sieg if it's really alright for them to trust the words of a man like Mist. Even Lost doesn't entirely trust Mist, but if what he says is true, then they should be able to save everyone by defeating the boss. Once they finally arrive in the boss temple, Mist turns to face the group and gives them a little more info about the dragon and the labyrinth stampede. When the hero defeats the dragon, it is forced to go to sleep in a separate realm, and it takes a tremendous amount of magic to awaken the beast, but that magic power is gathered by the monsters that run rampant in the labyrinth. At which point, it is then the responsibility of the labyrinth boss to deliver the magic to the dragon so it can awaken. In other words, if they can defeat the labyrinth boss, it will stop bothering the stampede and the revival of Evil Dragon, but that won't solve the main problem here. Even if they cut off the dragon's mana supply here, it will simply try again using another labyrinth, but at the very least, defeating the boss here will buy them a decent amount of time to figure out what to do when the dragon eventually tries to awaken again. Mist walks up to Temple Gate and slams his staff into the ground to get the attention of the labyrinth boss, the Siren. Once it comes out, Mist tells everyone to attack it with everything they have, so they all charge at it. Armia uses a spell to bind the Siren in place while Sieg and Ronaldo both leap into the air and use their swords to cut off the Siren's wings. So far, they are doing pretty well against it, but the Siren suddenly launches a barrage of blasts at the group in an attempt to stop them. However, Narcina jumps up and lands a devastating punch which cracks the Siren's face and causes it to try and flee. But before it could get away, Lost appeared in front of it and sliced it in half, officially defeating the labyrinth boss. This should have been a great victory for them, but all of a sudden, Handsome gets stabbed through the back by Dark Tendril, and they hear the voice of the evil dragon come through the portal. It looks like the dragon had already acquired enough mana to allow him to partially manifest through that portal, and the dragon seems to recognize Mist since it has seen him several times before. It is infuriated that Mist is once again interfering with his plans, but this time it won't allow anything to stop it, so it demands that Mist surrender his body to it if he doesn't want to see Handsome die. Mist knows that if he gives up his body to the dragon, it would mean certain doom for the world. So as much as he hates the idea of it, he's going to have to let Handsome die and then use all his power to seal the portal. However, Mist hesitates for a moment because he really doesn't want to let Handsome die, and that moment of hesitation was all it took for the dragon to forcefully take over his body. He begins using Mist's body as a medium to power the portal and transfer over all of his power, but there isn't enough mana in this labyrinth, so he teleports himself away to find a suitable power source. With the dragon gone, Handsome gets released and falls to the floor, so Lost rushes over to his side so he can heal the gaping hole in his chest. However, Handsome tells Lost to forget about healing him and go chase after the dragon because there's no telling what kind of damage it is going to do. Meanwhile, the dragon has just teleported to the outskirts of the city, and it wants to get in, so it begins using powerful magic to try and break the barrier, and it doesn't look like Ralma will be able to withstand much more damage. Ralma can sense the evil dragon within Mist, and she doesn't know how this happened or what's going on, but she's in no position to do anything about it, so she has to rely on Lost to save her. For now, Ralma's shield hasn't broken, but with the threat of the evil dragon looming over them, the people are literally oozing fear. And all that fear is being absorbed by the evil dragon to fuel his next attack. Once sufficient energy has been gathered, the ground begins to rumble because the second wave of the stampede is on its way. Inside the barrier, Marnal watches as monsters begin to pile up outside the barrier, and it is looking really bad. But he tries to assure the kids that everything is going to be fine since the barrier is still standing, and as long as it is there, then none of the monsters will be able to get in. But even if that's the case, the barrier can't last forever, especially not with all those monsters attacking it, so it's only a matter of time before it collapses. Outside, Ronaldo is worried about Ralma since all those monsters smacking the barrier are putting her life at risk, although it's not like they are doing much better over here. Lost has been trying to heal Handsome for a while now, but the thing that stabbed Handsome's chest was a mass of condensed dark mana, so Lost's healing magic isn't as effective on the wound. While Lost keeps trying to heal him, Handsome wakes up and asks Lost to go save Mist instead. Handsome cares deeply for Mist because he wasn't just his master, he was his benefactor. Lost knows better than anyone how labyrinth orphans like them were treated like disposable pawns by everyone, but Mist was different. He taught Handsome everything he knows even though he was a talentless nobody. Mist's generosity was in part because he needed a human to run the guild in his place to hide the fact that he was an elf, but even so, Handsome feels greatly indebted to him for all he has done. Over the years, Mist must have also come to truly care about Handsome as well, which is why he hesitated when Handsome's life was in danger. It makes Handsome happy to know that at least one person valued his life in this world, but he wishes Mist had just let him die then because it would have given meaning to his worthless life and saved them from this whole mess. Lost tells Handsome he is wrong about his life being worthless because after the time they spent together, Lost came to care about Handsome and thinks of him as a friend. Handsome admits that he also thinks of Lost as a friend, which was why he kept trying to get him to leave the city so he wouldn't end up getting involved in this catastrophe, but that didn't work out as he had hoped. Just then, Marcena yells at Handsome because even if he was forced to keep the stampede a secret by the Prime Minister, with the way he acted towards Lost, he doesn't deserve to call himself a friend. Lost tries to calm Marcena down, but Handsome says she's right, he has no right to call himself a friend, so he asks Lost to stop healing him because he deserves to die after what he has done. However, Marcena yells that Handsome needs to take responsibility for his actions, so he can't let himself die until he has made up for what he did. Back in the town, Marnal has rallied all the adventurers available so they can all go out and fight the monsters. Lost and the others are surprised to see that the adventurers left the safety of the barrier to fight, but they must be trying to lighten Ralma's load a little, and with them fighting, she should be able to last a little longer. So far, everything has gone according to Mist's plan aside from the fact that he got his body snatched, so they need to figure out a way to get the dragon out of Mist's body. Before they get started, Ronaldo asks if anyone wants to leave since there's still time to run away if they want to, but they all know it would be pointless to run since if the dragon revives itself, then the whole world will be destroyed and there's nowhere to run from that. They all agree to work together to take down the dragon, but before they get started, Lost tells Marcena to stay behind. They begin their fight with the dragon by launching a fireball at it. This gets the dragon's attention, and it is annoyed that they would dare to attack it, so it turns to face them. Meanwhile, Marcena is still over on the hill since Lost told her to stay back, and the reason he didn't want her to join the battle was because she's the sleeping princess, so if the dragon recognizes her, then she could be put in grave danger. The group begins fighting the dragon, although the dragon isn't taking any of this seriously since there's no way for them to come after him in the air. The group may not have flight magic, but they do have an explosion spell, so Lost gets onto the rock and Armia fires her spell, launching him high into the sky. The dragon is impressed by how reckless Lost is willing to be just to take it out, but even this human bullet move won't be enough to stop him as he stabs Lost through the chest before he could strike. It then drops Lost to the ground, where Lost starts to bleed out and Narcina can't bear to watch this anymore, so she decides to step in despite Lost's warning. Everyone runs over to Lost's side to check on him, but once they arrive, they discover that it's much worse than they had originally thought. Lara begins healing him in an attempt to save his life, but while they are trying to help Lost, the dragon begins prying into the barrier again. So at this rate, Ralma isn't going to last very long. Ronaldo thinks they should evacuate the people in the city before the barrier is broken so they don't end up dying, but even if they do that, Narcina realizes that there will be nowhere for them to run to since the entire world will be destroyed once the dragon revives itself. There's only one option left at this point, so Narcina decides that she's going to use her sleeping princess powers to stop the dragon. Ronaldo asks her if she's sure about this because using that power will mean that she has to sacrifice herself. And on top of that, the sleeping princess power isn't a perfect fix for the dragon's rampage. It may be able to put it to sleep, but that slumber will only last 10 years at most. He once again asks her if she is willing to sacrifice her life just to put the dragon to sleep for 10 years. Narcina admits that 10 years isn't a lot of time, but the same 10 years would allow them to come up with a plan to defeat the dragon. If the hero isn't present, then she trusts that her friends will be able to find it before 10 years pass. Narcina then stands before thee and announces herself, telling the dragon to come and devour her. The dragon knows who Narcina is, but as much as it wants to resist the urge to eat her, it is completely overwhelmed by desire, so it slowly approaches and is about to kill her. Lost regains consciousness just as the dragon is about to kill her, and every atom in his body refuses to let that happen, so he unleashes the unknown power from before. Sieg and the others realize what's happened to Lost, so Sieg tells everyone to retreat immediately since they don't want to get caught in the crossfire of what's about to happen. The dragon has no idea what's going on since no human should be capable of producing this much power, but before it can make any guesses, Lost charges at it and begins punching the daylights out of the dragon. It's good that Lost is defeating the dragon for them, but if he continues fighting like this, then there's a chance that he might end up stuck in this form forever. And if that happens, the original Lost will be lost forever. After punching the dragon for a while, Lost grabs it by the shirt and raises his hand to end it once and for all. But before he does, because Narcina doesn't want him to lose himself, she gets in the front of him and tries to get him to stop. Seeing that Narcina is alright, Lost manages to snap out of his power-filled rage and thanks Narcina for being there for him. Meanwhile, the badly injured dragon tries to take the opportunity to sneak away. However, in his weakened state, Mist is able to regain partial control over his body, so refuses to let the dragon get away and holds it in place so Lost can finally take it out. Hamzam tells for Lost to finish it, but Lost is hesitant to kill a good person like Mist. However, Mist assures him that he is fine with their outcome because he has lived for so long that death doesn't scare him anymore. Lost raises his sword and agrees to finish Mist off to get rid of the dragon, but Narcina knows that doing something like this is going to be very difficult for Lost, so she offers to support him and shoulder half the burden. Lost appreciates the help, so the two of them raise the dagger and slowly begin walking towards the dragon while Mist holds it in place. They then plunge the dagger deep into Mist's chest, causing the evil dragon to be expelled from his body. However, the wound left on Mist is guaranteed to be fatal. Mist thanks everyone for their help since with this they have managed to cut off the mana flow to the portal, so the dragon won't be able to invade this world anymore. On top of that, the mana surrounding the city should naturally disperse after a while, so the stampede will end soon, and it's all thanks to Lost and Narcina. Once the stampede finally ends, Ronaldo goes to turn the barrier off and release Ralma from the pod, so she finally steps out and is relieved that the pod didn't suck her dry before the stampede ended. A little while later, the king receives a report on the incident that occurred, and he is glad to find out that the evil dragon has been temporarily defeated and the city of Marmot is still standing. However, even if it worked out this time, he isn't convinced that Lost can be an adequate substitute for the hero. Meanwhile, back at the guild in Marmot, Hamzam tells Amherst that he wants her to become the new guild branch president since Mist is now dead. Normally, the role would fall on Hamzam's shoulders, but he has other things he wants to do, so he wants Amherst to take his place for him. Amherst refuses and explains that she isn't a good leader, so she could never properly run the guild. However, Handsome isn't much better at it either, so he still thinks Amherst is the best option. To convince her to take the role, he leans in close and tells her about the salary she'd be getting paid, and all of a sudden, she's perfectly fine with becoming the new branch president. Later that night, a huge party is held to celebrate the successful defense of the city, and at one of the tables, Ronaldo talks with Lyra and Seed about Lost. He tells them that he already knew about the mysterious power Lost possesses, and it's too much for Seed to manage, so he suggests that he should leave it to be handled by the Royal Capital Guild instead. Meanwhile, Lost is on the terrace with Narcina and tells her that even if they've managed to stop the dragon temporarily, it will still return one day, which is why he has decided to go on a journey to find the hero so they'll be ready next time, and he wants Narcina to join him on his journey. Narcina happily agrees since all she wants is to be able to spend time with Lost as his party member. The next morning, Lost and Narcina head out on their journey, and as they walk off into the sunset, C and the others watch from a distance. Armia asks if it is really alright for them to let Lost go like this since they were supposed to be monitoring him, but Lyra and Seed don't think it would be right to butt in since Lost and Narcina have already made their decision. And besides, as long as they are adventurers, they will surely meet again in some labyrinth. This was the final episode. Subscribe for more anime recaps.